Even if it's the same path of a ruler or the path of emotionlessness, it can't be completely the same. Thus, if one wants to be the strongest, one must create their own martial technique. For example, the Rain Emperor created the Son of Heaven fist technique. It may not be the strongest fist technique, but it's the fist technique that best suits the Rain Emperor. As his cultivation level increases, the power of the fist technique will also increase, and in the end, it will reach great accomplishment. Only the heights that the Rain Emperor will be able to reach in the future is unknown. Since I'm specialized in the sword in this life, then I'll create a sword technique, a sword Tao that belongs to me, and improve as my cultivation level increases. I've had this idea before, but I've never put it into practice. Now that I've advanced into the flower blossom tier, it's time to put it on the agenda. As Ling Han cultivated the Desolation Hell sword, he deduced the sword Tao and carried on accumulating knowledge. One day, he would accumulate enough knowledge to unleash it, and with a moment of enlightenment, he might have inspiration. Not only him, but the cultivation of Lu Yutong and the others, after experiencing a period of stagnation, began to soar again. Although it wasn't as exaggerated as before, it was still faster than most people. Ling Han naturally took care of Ling Dongxing the most. Only 3 months passed, and Ling Dongxing advanced into the spiritual ocean tier. This speed was frighteningly fast. Blindly pursuing cultivation level wasn't good. It was like pulling up seedlings to help them grow, hurting a martial artist's foundation and affecting their future potential. However, Ling Han had no choice. After all, his father wasn't young anymore, and if he didn't quickly reach the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier and save enough time to charge into the flower blossom tier, then Ling Dongxing might only have a mere 100 years of lifespan. In this life, he finally had parents, and Ling Han was confident that he would definitely become a god, so he obviously didn't want to spend a short few decades with his parents. Thus, he had to at least let his parents advance into the flower blossom tier, so that after he became a god, he would have time to find divine medicine and refine it into a divine pill, allowing his parents to become gods in one step. His relationship with Zhu Xian'er and the other 2 girls also became more and more harmonious. Although they didn't have too intimate contact, their feelings deepened day by day. Zhu Xian'er, on the other hand, didn't dare to let Ling Han hug her anymore because of the broken bones incident. Even if she glanced at Ling Han's lower body, she would blush, extremely beautiful. This night, after Ling Han finished cultivating, he also went to bed to rest, and soon emitted thin and long breathing sounds. Even if he advanced into the flower blossom tier and left the mortal world, sleep was still the fastest and best way to recover spirit power. Thus, even if he didn't sleep for half a month, he would still be full of energy, but he would still sleep on time every night. However, tonight was a bit unpeaceful. Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes. He discovered that the window moved, and 2 sword-wielding people entered. The moonlight was clear, reflecting a cold light on the swords. Thieves, Ling Han sneered inwardly. They actually stole from him. Were they seeking death? He was just about to make a move, but was startled. With his eyesight, he could see things clearly even in the dark, so he naturally saw the appearance of these 2 people, and he actually knew these 2 thieves. He deliberately snorted and sat up on the bed. Shwa, shwa, 2 swords were immediately pressed against his neck, and a female voice was heard. Don't move, or else I'll take your life. Sister, don't scare him. What if this guy is timid and screams instead? Another female voice was heard. This scene was really familiar. You shut up. The elder sister reprimanded. The younger sister snorted, still unconvinced. What she said was very reasonable. Ling Han smiled, and said, Don't worry, I'm very bold, I won't scream. The 2 sisters were startled. They certainly saw bold people, but bold to such an extent was really rare. You're too calm, don't you know there are 2 swords pressed against your neck? Hong. At this moment, a loud sound was heard from outside, and a mighty voice rang out. People in the town, get out. Chapter 521. Ling Han sighed, and said, "Tell me, who did you assassinate this time? You actually failed again, provoking others to come after you instead." "Huh, how do you know we are assassins?" the younger sister asked curiously. "Even now, you still haven't recognized my voice." Ling Han was speechless. How could this pair of sisters be called assassins? The younger sister hurriedly lit the oil lamp and waved it in front of Ling Han. She could not help but exclaim, pointing at Ling Han, and said, "It's you. Why are you here?" This pair of assassin sisters were naturally Lu Feng-er and Lu Ru-er. Previously, they had failed to assassinate Su Ku-Xian, and had left with Yun Shuang. Now that he thought about it, they were indeed from Fire Country, but it was too much of a coincidence that they would meet in such a large country. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Let's not worry about why I'm here for now. How are you going to settle your matters?" "We'll have to trouble Major Han to hide us sisters again," Lu Feng-er said with a smile. This young man was so calm and collected that he did not seem like a teenager at all, giving her a strange sense of security. "Che, you don't even know who you've offended, running to such a remote and desolate place to seek refuge, and you still want to protect us?" Lu Ru-er was still the same, feeling uncomfortable if she did not say a few words. Ling Han pursed his lips, and said, "Then I'm really sorry. Please leave as you came." "Petty, I was just saying, is there a need to take it so seriously?" Lu Ru-er pouted. "Honestly, who did you guys offend this time?" Ling Han sighed. Lu Ru-er was instantly full of herself, and said, "The person we assassinated this time was an important official of Fire Country, Na Ji-yen." What kind of strange name is that?" Ling Han hurriedly interrupted. Na Ji-yen, a stinky man, actually chose such a sissy name. Lu Ru-er seemed to have found a confidant, and her face was full of agreement. "That's right, I said that this person's name is not good." Lu Feng-er helplessly replied, "The name doesn't matter. What's important is that Na Ji-yen has suddenly appeared in the recent half a year and has become the Fire Emperor's most valued person. He has bewitched the Fire Emperor into mining an incomparably evil mine. Every time he returns from mining, the workers would suddenly die the next day. But the Fire Emperor did not stop at all, and continued to gather manpower from all over the kingdom to dig up that mine. Whoever dares to disobey will be killed. Now, everyone is in a state of panic, and all of them hate that Na Ji-yen to the core." Lu Ru-er continued, "Our Falling Flower Palace has received orders from countless people from all over the kingdom to kill that Na Ji-yen, and rid the empire of a scourge." "Tisk, as an assassin, you've also developed feelings," Ling Han said with a smile. "Don't look down on us. There are 3 kinds of people we don't kill," Lu Ru-er said proudly. "We don't kill children, we don't kill the elderly, and we don't kill those who do good." Ling Han smiled and nodded, saying, "What happened after that?" "You went to assassinate Na Ji-yen, but failed, and were pursued by him for 10,000 kilometers. Lu Ru-er pouted, and said, "Can't you think of us a little more grandiose? That we managed to shake off our pursuers after the assassination succeeded?" "Hee hee. What do you mean by hee hee?" Lu Ru-er placed her hands on her hips, looking very displeased. "Hong!" A loud sound rang out from outside. It should be the sound of a house collapsing. The voice from before rang out again, "When the Imperial Guards are handling matters, they can act first and report later. Anyone who has not arrived at the east gate of the town in 15 minutes' time will be killed without mercy." Ling Han nodded, and said, "Na Ji-yen is indeed very favored." When he was assassinated, the Imperial Guards were actually dispatched to pursue the culprit. Hang, but there were 7 high-level spiritual ocean tier cultivators chasing after us. Thankfully, we were quick-witted and escaped quickly, Lu Ru-er said proudly. "Young Master Han." Zhu Wujiu's voice rang out from outside the door. Ling Han thought for a moment, then said, "Send those people away. You can teach them a suitable lesson, but there is no need to kill them." "Yes." Zhu Wujiu received his orders and left. He was now in the third layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, and had also refined the heavenly luck stone. His battle prowess had soared to 11 battle stars, and he was definitely one of the strongest in Fire Country. Yet Ling Han sighed. With such a ruckus, the Ling family would have to move again. This pair of sisters really kept creating trouble for him. Hey, that little follower of yours could also deal with those Imperial guards outside? Those are all high-level spiritual ocean tier cultivators. Lu Ru'er called out in disbelief. Don't be impatient. Ling Han pressed his hands together, and casually asked, is Yun Shuang well? Very well. She is now a famous entertainer in the Imperial City, and everyone would be proud to hear Lady Shuang personally play a song. Who knows how many people want to marry her? Lu Ru'er said, looking at Ling Han with a slightly mischievous expression, imagining Ling Han's disappointed expression. How could Ling Han possibly care about Yun Shuang? He merely thought of this pair of sisters and asked in passing. After a while, Zhu Wujiu returned, and said at the door, young Master Han, the matter has been resolved. Do you have any other instructions? Ling Han nodded, and said, go and rest. Yes. Zhu Wujiu finally left. Lu Ru'er and Lu Ru'er's faces were filled with shock. After a while, Lu Ru'er finally said, hey, is that subordinate of yours boasting? Ling Han shrugged, and said, can you still hear the barking of dogs? Lu Ru'er was startled at first, and then realized that Ling Han had called those Imperial Guards dogs. She could not help but giggle, but immediately covered her mouth with her hand, and said, I really can't hear them. Lu Ru'er's face was also filled with shock, and she said, young Master Han, those are all high-level spiritual ocean tier cultivators. Ling Han laughed, and said, the trouble has been resolved, so you two can leave now, and never see each other again. Nothing good will come out of meeting you two. We're not jinxes. Lu Ru'er's face was filled with displeasure, but she immediately said, since your subordinates are so powerful, why don't you lend them to us for a few days, and help us kill that Na Ji Yen? Ling Han snorted, and said, you have the nerve to say such things. To be an assassin like you, how embarrassing. This time, we're getting rid of a scourge for the people. Lu Ru'er grabbed hold of Ling Han, and said, forget it, since you're now in Fire Country, and coincidentally bumped into us, this is the arrangement of the heavens, and we need you to help us. Ling Han did not comment, but he could not deny that this matter was really too coincidental. Lu Ru'er and her sister could not have gone anywhere else, and just had to come to the place where he was living in seclusion. He rubbed his chin. If the Fire Emperor continued to act willfully, then no matter where the Ling family moved to, they would still be conscripted by the Imperial family to dig for that whatever mine. Unless they left Fire Country. However, what kind of mine could cause the Fire Emperor to go crazy to the point of destroying the foundations of his own country? Ling Han asked, do you know what kind of mine it is? I don't know. I only know that strange ores can be dug out from there every day, and they are all sent to the Imperial family. Lu Ru'er shook her head. Ling Han's curiosity was piqued. Chapter 522. For a person like Ling Han, once his curiosity was aroused, he would not be able to restrain himself. He was indeed very curious. Regardless of whether those who entered the mine had cultivated or not, or how high their cultivation level was, as long as they entered, they would definitely die the next day, unless they never came out. What kind of power was that? And what was the use of the ores dug out from the mine that the Fire Emperor would treasure them so much that he would not hesitate to force his people to dig them out for him? He decided to go to the Imperial City. With his current cultivation level of flower blossom tier and battle prowess as high as 13 stars, who in the whole of Rain Country could threaten him? Knowing that Ling Han was going to the Imperial City, Lu Feng'er and her sister were naturally overjoyed, but when Ling Han did not bring along the powerful subordinate from yesterday, and only Hun Yo, they were dumbfounded. What are you two going to do? Sightseeing? Young Master Han, should we bring along your subordinate? Lu Feng suggested. That's right, that's right. That's the imperial city. There is no lack of powerful warriors of spiritual pedestal tier, and the imperial family has powerful warriors of flower blossom tier who can teach you a lesson. Lu Ru'er said directly. Heng, Niu can fight 10, Hu Niu said, unconvinced. Lu Ru'er and her sister knew that Hu Niu was a bit of a monster, but they definitely did not think that this little girl could compare to them, let alone fight against spiritual pedestal tier and flower blossom tier elites. They were trying to persuade Ling Han to bring Zhu Wujiu along. I said there's no need, Ling Han said with a smile, snapped his fingers, and said, let's go. Lu Feng and her sister had no choice but to set off. They believed that after Ling Han met with a rebuff, he would still come back and bring Zhu Wujiu along. At most, it would just be another trip. The four of them set off towards the imperial city. For Ling Han, this was only a small journey, so he did not bring Lu Yutong and the others. He believed that things would be settled in a few days. After a few days, they arrived at the imperial city. Ling Han also found out more about the current popular man of the imperial court, Na Zhiyan. This was an extremely mysterious man. He had suddenly appeared half a year ago, and then became the most popular man in front of the Fire Emperor, and was in charge of the excavation of the mine. At first, no one took it to heart, but as soon as they started digging, they discovered a problem. It turned out that the miners would suddenly die the next day after coming out. After flipping through the historical records, he discovered that this mine had actually had a problem a long time ago, so it had long been sealed. However, because of Na Zhiyan's suggestion, it had been reopened. No one knew what was produced in the mine, only that it was blood-red stones that were continuously sent to the palace. Although a large number of miners would die every few days, causing the officials to protest, the Fire Emperor was stubborn and refused to seal the mines. Instead, he recruited people from all over the country to enter the mines. First, it was death row prisoners, then ordinary prisoners. Now, people were sent to the mines after they were caught. If they didn't go in, they would be executed immediately. The people around the imperial capital were in a state of panic, living under terror. This Na Zhiyan, just who is he, and what is his goal? Ling Han could not help but be curious, but he decided to first go to the mines. Let's go, I'll bring you to see your old lover first. Lu Ru'er grabbed onto Ling Han, wanting to bring him to see Yun Shuang. Yun Shuang was born in the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, so she had walked the same path in Fire Country. She had bought a quiet and elegant courtyard in the imperial capital, and would entertain some nobles every day. She would charge a hefty entrance fee, but they could forget about getting intimate with her. She only sold her skills, not her body. However, her status continued to climb, and countless people were willing to pay a hefty price to hear her sing a song. It was just like the old saying, the unobtainable is the best. Now, there were quite a number of young masters who wanted to marry this seductive beauty. They fought openly and secretly, all of them being generous. One day, they would give her a house, the next, she would give her jewelry. Yun Shuang's current wealth was definitely shocking. The four of them arrived at Yun Shuang's courtyard. It was built next to a lake, and the environment was very beautiful. Although Na Zhiyan had caused great panic in Fire Country, to the higher-ups, their peaceful lives had not been disrupted. They continued to indulge in debauchery as they pleased. As a matter of fact, there was already a long queue at the entrance of the courtyard. The Little Frost Cloud courtyard did not accept reservations. If you wanted to hear Yun Shuang sing, you would have to come early to line up. However, Lady Shuang had the habit of sleeping late, and would only open the door in the afternoon to welcome guests, which completely whetted everyone's appetite. Ling Han nodded. If he had handed over Forget-Not and Alchemy King Pavilion to Yun Shuang to manage, perhaps their business would have been several times better. What are you guys doing? Line up, line up, do you understand? Seeing Ling Han and the others walk straight towards the entrance, everyone was displeased. Lu Feng-er and her sister ignored them, and when they arrived at the entrance, they took out a black plaque and waved it. The old servant at the entrance immediately let them in, and Ling Han naturally held Hunyo's hand and followed them in. This caused a great many people to be displeased, and they were even more suspicious. A young man had entered Lady Shuang Shuang's courtyard. A man and a woman all by themselves, what good things could he do? What a beast, even bringing such a young girl, young Master Han. Not long after Ling Han walked into the courtyard, he saw Yun Shuang Shuang hurriedly walk out. She only had a thin layer of clothing draped over her, and her hair was disheveled. Obviously, she was indeed sleeping. When she knew that Ling Han had arrived, she immediately ran out. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Long time no see." Yun Shuang Shuang hurriedly nodded, her beautiful eyes filled with tears of excitement. To her, Ling Han was her savior, and he had helped her selflessly without asking for anything in return, unlike the others who had set their eyes on her beauty. "Let's go." Hunyo shook Ling Han's hand. She was very jealous. Ling Han nodded, and said to Yun Shuang Shuang, "You're doing well now, take care of yourself in the future." Yun Shuang Shuang could not help but be disappointed, and said, "Young Master Han won't stay a little longer? I have something to do." Ling Han smiled. He then turned to Lu Feng-er and Lu Ru-er, and said, "I have my own plans regarding Na Ji Yen. You two obediently go and do what you need to do. Otherwise, if you're being hunted down again, I won't make a move." "Che, you make it sound like you're very powerful." Lu Ru'er stuck out her tongue. Ling Han naturally would not lower himself to her level, and left with Hunyo. He would explore the mines, and then go look for Na Ji Yen. If he needed to be killed, then he would kill, and if he needed to be crippled, then he would cripple. He did not want to waste any more time here. The two of them, one big and one small, walked out, only to see that the people outside immediately glared at them, their expressions extremely unfriendly. "Halt!" A young man jumped out. He was about 23 or 24 years old, and was in the 7th layer of gushing spring tier. In the desolate north, he was considered a genius. Ling Han sighed. "Why did people have to seek trouble? What is your relationship with Lady Shuang Shuang?" The young man asked, his face filled with jealousy. Ling Han was the first man to enter Lady Shuang Shuang's side courtyard alone. Although he had only entered for a short while, and it was impossible for anything to have happened, the men outside were still burning with jealousy. "None of your business," Ling Han said in exasperation. "Get lost, don't seek trouble for yourself." "How arrogant!" The young man smirked coldly, and drew out the long sword at his waist. With a slight shake, a cold light flashed, and he said, "You dare to be rude to a descendant of the Bo clan, kill without mercy." He brazenly drew his sword, and actually used the pretense of righteousness to vent his personal hatred. His sword attacked directly at Ling Han's vitals, obviously intending to take Ling Han's life. Chapter 523. The power of the nation was a double-edged sword. If you governed a country to the point where the people were at peace and prosperity, then the support of the people would result in the power of the nation being a positive energy that could allow your strength to skyrocket. But if you were a tyrant and incited the anger of the people, then the power of the nation would be a negative energy. Not only would it not have any additional effects, it would even decrease. That was why the 5 great sects did not use the power of the nation even though they clearly knew that it was beneficial. That was because when the time came to refine the realm pill, the people would naturally turn their backs on them. This would result in terrifying consequences that would directly affect the quality of the realm pill. "My tanned brother, are you willing to lend me a hand now?" Ma Duobao asked with a smile, somewhat expectant. People who jumped out of the river of fate were too rare, and there were even 2 of them. It seemed as if there was some kind of arrangement in the unseen world. Ling Han thought for a moment, and said, I'd better return to the Restore Heaven Academy and strive to have more people break away from the control of the 5 great sections. When the time is right, I'll bring them along to the Purple Moon Empire. Good. Ma Duobao clapped his hands and laughed loudly, appearing to be very happy. Then I'll bestow you the title of 9th king. Don't. Ling Han hurriedly waved his hand. I'm not interested, and I don't want to worship a big fatty like you. It's better to be a free and unfettered person. The Lunar King smiled tenderly, looked at Ling Han, and said, this king likes this kind of person. You're not allowed to like Nyo's Ling Han. Hu Nyo was petty, and immediately hugged Ling Han, glaring at the Lunar King. Everyone, for everyone's future, please lend me a hand, Ma Duobao said seriously. Feng Peyun and Ling Han both nodded, while Yi Shuang yawned, appearing to be disinterested and uninterested. Your Majesty, with the 5 great sects' 10,000 years of accumulation, the shattering void tier elites will be counted in the hundreds. Do you have any countermeasures? Ling Han asked. Ma Duobao appeared to be brimming with confidence, and said, each of my 8 kings can fight 1 against 10, and I'm not afraid of this. The only 2 things to worry about is when the divine realm will make a move, and the second is those people in the desolate north who cultivate the netherworld's mystic arts. The Thousand Corpse sect can't be underestimated either, Ling Han said. No matter, without 10,000 years of accumulation, the Thousand Corpse sect can only be said to be ordinary. Ma Duobao didn't care at all. Come, drink, drink. Everyone drank, no longer talking about splitting open the skies. Ling Han asked Small Tower in his heart, my fate has been changed, did you do something to it? There's no need for me to do anything. You're the fusion of 2 souls, so your destiny has naturally changed, Small Tower said calmly. Moreover, this realm's regulations of heaven and earth are not complete at all. Changing them is as easy as lifting a finger, so there's no need to be surprised. It would be strange if you wasn't surprised. Do you still have many secrets that you haven't told me? Ling Han suddenly asked. Small Tower was silent for a moment, and said, when you need to know, I'll naturally tell you. Fuck, this tool spirit was indeed hiding something. Ling Han couldn't do anything about it. Though he was the master of the Black Tower, he still had to obtain the support of Small Tower. Otherwise, he could only stare at it helplessly. This god tool obviously hadn't completely acknowledged him. Strictly speaking, he was only borrowing it now. You're using a tool to bully its master, treason and heresy. Hee hee. Small Tower gave him face and laughed, but did not pay any more attention to him. Ling Han and Ma Duobao conversed for a very long time. He told the latter all the things that he had learned from Zi Shuxian, and Ma Duobao was not stingy in sharing with him some crucial information regarding splitting open the skies and the use of power of the nation. Afterwards, the Lunar King also led her troops into battle, speeding up the expansion of the Purple Moon Empire. In the distant history of this empire, there had been a total of 8 powerful kings, and only 4 had been found. The other 4 were buried in some unknown corner underground. Because too much time had passed, just like how Ling Han could not find the Boundless Mountain, it was not an easy thing for Ma Duobao to find his 8 kings. What was even more different was that the 8 kings had been buried for more than 10,000 years. The terrain had changed, and even if the original burial site was found, the people might not be found. Maybe because of an earthquake, they were buried several tens or hundreds of miles underground. Ling Han set out together with the Lunar King, and when he reached the border of the Purple Moon Empire, he turned back and headed towards the Restore Heaven Academy. Yi Shuang fought with Feng Peyun, and Ling Han took the opportunity to slip away. However, this demoness probably wouldn't give up. The 3 kings of the Purple Moon Empire had an irresistible force all the way, and had already conquered almost 1/10 of the Middle States territory. In terms of territory alone, they were fully deserving of being the number 1 force. However, in the world of martial arts, whether one was strong or not wasn't determined by territory, but by the number and quality of elites. The 5 great sects' resistance was also getting stronger and stronger, and heavenly astral kings and the others' pace of advancement was already greatly affected. Now, a city and a pond required a lot of time and a price to be taken down, and there was still uncertainty. Maybe the moment 1 foot left, the city wall would change to a different king's flag. In such an atmosphere, Ling Han returned to the Restore Heaven Academy. When they saw Ling Han, everyone pointed at him and whispered. This was a fierce person who killed Small Saber King. However, many people's gazes weren't reverence, but rather gloating. When Ling Han arrived at Li Big Mouth, he knew why. Su Xiu Ran came into being. He hadn't arrived at the Restore Heaven Academy yet, but had come here to gain experience and challenge various famous figures. There was no lack of deity transformation tier elites, but they were all beheaded by him with one strike, without exception. And this person's cultivation was shockingly only in the spiritual infant tier. Another freak had appeared. In comparison, Small Saber King was indeed far inferior to him. Su Xiu Ran had already spread the word that when he arrived at the Restore Heaven Academy, it would be the day of Ling Han's death. Now, the disciples of the 5 great sects were all looking forward to Su Xiu Ran's arrival to kill Ling Han, so as to restore the prestige of the 5 great sections. Regarding this, Ling Han only smiled faintly. His heart was now open-minded, and what he was thinking about was no longer fighting for supremacy, but looking at the whole world. How could a mere Su Xiu Ran be taken seriously by him? However, this didn't mean that Ling Han would lower his guard. It was just that he was too confident in himself. In a battle of the same tier, how could he lose to anyone? However, at this moment, a shocking piece of news came from the front. Because of the fierce battle between the Purple Moon Empire and the 5 great sects, a piece of heaven and earth was shattered, and the entrance to a historical site appeared. Now, the 2 armies temporarily stopped fighting, and both dispatched experts to enter the historical site to search for the treasures inside. To be able to make 2 forces that were as incompatible as fire and water put down their weapons and enter the historical site together to search for treasures, what kind of astonishing treasures would be hidden inside? After the news arrived, the students of the Restore Heaven Academy set out one after another, heading towards the historical site. Something like opportunity had nothing to do with strength, but rather depended on one's luck. Ling Han naturally set out as well. As his tier became higher and higher, his need for natural treasures also became higher and higher. The advancement of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll and 9 Dragons' Tyrant Body art both required the support of massive amounts of natural treasures. Moreover, to refine a real treasured medicine, he also needed even higher grade materials, which was what the Black Tower currently lacked. Chapter 524. The surroundings of the mine were heavily guarded, not to stop people from entering, but to prevent people from escaping. After knowing what this place was, who would take the initiative to enter? Every day, many people would be escorted here to temporarily stay, and when the previous batch of miners died, a new batch would naturally go down. If they didn't go down, they would be beheaded immediately. Under high pressure, even if they could only live for one more day, there were still many people who wanted to gamble on their luck. Perhaps they could be an exception and survive? To prevent the miners temporarily staying here from escaping, a high wall was built here. It was built with thick and heavy rocks, definitely not something an ordinary person could dig through. It was like the Great Wall, as tall as 15 meters, and similarly difficult to jump over. Moreover, there were guards patrolling below the high wall, so escaping was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Of course, this was for ordinary people. Ling Han and Hunyo leaped, and arrived within the high wall. "Who are you people?" the guards inside the wall immediately asked, 7 spears pointed at them at the same time. "Let them in." Bo Wen-lin appeared. He stood on the high wall in the distance. As long as Ling Han entered the mine, he would help him along the way. If his enemy wanted to commit suicide, he obviously wouldn't mind giving him a hand. After all, he didn't wear Ling Han, giving him an extremely dangerous feeling, and didn't want to confront Ling Han head-on. Yes, Lord Bo, the guards hurriedly answered. Their duty was to prevent the miners from escaping. It didn't matter if someone wanted to go in, since they would die the next day after coming out anyway. Ling Han looked around. In front of him was a large open-air mine, with crisscrossing tunnels that continuously dug down unfathomably deep. Even if they dug so deep, there was no water coming out from the bottom. From here, not a single miner could be seen. Obviously, they had all entered the depths of the mine. Wisps of blood-red chi rose from the mine, stopping 3 or 4 miles into the sky, forming a huge red cloud. Hunyo bared her teeth and revealed a fierce expression, appearing quite uneasy. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless, and strode towards the mine. When Ling Han's figure disappeared at the edge of the mine, Bo Wen-lin smiled coldly. This time, Ling Han was dead for sure, unless he stayed in the mine for the rest of his life. But could he not eat and drink? Ling Han entered the mining area. The ground beneath his feet was soft, and scarlet red soil was not rare. However, this place was ridiculously scarlet, as if it was dyed with blood. In particular, there were streams of red chi that continued to rise, and it was extremely strange. I have an ominous feeling, Ling Han said. This was a pure intuition. Hunyo nodded firmly. The two of them continued onwards. They could both fly with their physical bodies, but did not choose to do so. The soil and rocks here all gave Ling Han a very strange feeling. He picked up some rocks and soil and stored them into the Black Tower, then brought Hunyo with him and entered as well. Small tower, is there anything special about being able to produce these things? Ling Han asked. Small tower appeared, and said, the cursed land. Those who do not have a strong destiny will die very quickly after coming into contact with it. Curse? Ling Han was astounded. He had never heard of this kind of power. Could it be that cursing people to die wasn't just for show? It could really make people die, and destiny, what was this? Cursed resentment is also a kind of power. The evolution of Great Tao is endless and can be manifested in various forms, Small Tower said unhurriedly. Then I'm also cursed now? Ling Han asked. Yes, stepping onto the cursed land, you are naturally cursed. However, your destiny is very strong, and you won't die, at least to this extent, you won't die. Moreover, this level of curse power, I can easily dispel it, Small Tower said. Then what's a destiny? Ling Han asked again. Small Tower swayed, and said, why do you have so many questions? If you don't understand, ask. This is a good habit, Ling Han said with a smile. Destiny is preordained at birth, and to a great extent, it influences your fate, Small Tower said. Your 2 lives, your destiny is exactly the same, so you can fuse 2 souls, and not simply take over another's body. Tell me in detail. Ling Han suddenly became interested. I have no interest in satisfying your curiosity. Small Tower immediately became tsundere. Although the curse power contained in this soil is not much, to be able to reach such a degree by just spilling out, there must be a cursed tool buried in this land, or a person with an extremely special destiny is buried here, forming the power of the curse. Then what about Hunyo? Will she be affected? Ling Han asked again. This girl's destiny is too special. If I don't use my source power, I won't be able to see through it, Small Tower said calmly. Only then did Ling Han relax, and exited the Black Tower with Hunyo, continuing onwards. Could it be that what Na Ji Yen and the Fire Emperor were after was the cursed tool in this ancient mine? A dead person shouldn't be able to steal it, unless it was the Thousand Corpse sect. The two of them stepped on the slightly damp and soft ground, walking all the way down. This place was like a bowl, the further they went, the wider it was, and the shallower it was. As they continued to go deeper, they also went deeper and deeper, and their surroundings also became darker and darker. If it wasn't for the fact that Ling Han and Hu Niu's eyesight was extraordinary, they would probably be blind even with their eyes open. However, as they went further down, they saw the flickering of torches. It was so dark, so it was naturally impossible for them to be mining. When they saw Ling Han's leisurely appearance, and there was actually a little girl tugging at the corner of his clothes, the miners all revealed expressions of disbelief. They began to doubt their own eyes, wondering if they were hallucinating. Ling Han's gaze swept over them, and saw that these people's faces were completely numb. After entering this place, it was equivalent to being a dead person, so who would still be spirited? Food, food. When they saw the jerky in Hu Niu's hands, their eyes instantly lit up, and like pedestrians in a desert that saw an oasis, they all pounced over, looking like they wanted to snatch it. Ling Han was amused. These few normal people also wanted to rob him and Hu Niu. Hu Niu was the most protective of her food, and immediately revealed a ferocious look. Dare to snatch her food? Ling Han pulled Hu Niu back, smiled, and said, "It's not that I can't eat, just answer a few questions for me." He waved his finger, and immediately left a deep mark on a rock, frightening the miners into immediately stopping. "What do you want to know?" Those people stared at the jerky in Hu Niu's hands, asking while drooling. "The situation here, tell me everything you know." Those people all nodded at each other, and began to talk. They were sent here 7 days ago, and when they entered the mine, they brought 2 days' worth of food and clean water. If they wanted to obtain more food, they could only mine diligently and use ores to exchange for food. However, the ores here were very rare, so they were all as hungry as wolves, and were only short of cannibalism. Ling Han was puzzled, and asked, "The people outside actually replenish your food? How do they do it?" Chapter 525. The miners came one by one, and Ling Han also gave them food, dispelling their worries, and told him everything he wanted to know. It turned out that leaving the mine pit meant dying the next day, but it didn't mean that staying didn't mean they wouldn't die. Here, some people died suddenly after only 3 or 4 days, while others could live for 10 days to half a month, but without exception, they would all die in the end. But as long as people lived, they would struggle at death's door. They still had to fight to fill their stomachs. The guards didn't dare to enter the mine pit, so they could only use food to exchange for the ores they mined. They exchanged at the boundary of the mining area, tossing it to each other, "And I'll toss it to you." However, no one dared to hide their food and bring it to the mining area, because it would be snatched clean by others at any moment. They ate it immediately once they got it, not leaving a single bit behind. Although this was a mine pit, there wasn't much of that kind of blood-red ores, so some people had very tough lives. They didn't die from the curse, but died from hunger and thirst. But for those who died here, no one would want to eat their corpses, because the flesh of the dead was black, and there was poison or something. Anyway, whoever ate it would die. Thus, other than some evil acts of cannibalism at the beginning, there were no more incidents later. Not everyone worked hard to mine ores. Some people formed gangs, or thought they were strong enough, and started to rob others. However, the people here died too quickly, and whatever gang or elite they were, they would soon disappear. When Ling Han heard this, he didn't know what to feel. "They are so pitiful," Hu Niu said. He didn't expect this little girl to sympathize with others. Ling Han rubbed Hu Niu's head, and said, "Niu Niu has grown up, and knows to care for others. However, they can't steal Niu's food to eat." Hu Niu immediately defended her sovereignty. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said to the miners, "Did you guys dig any ores? Give me, sell me a piece." He took out a pile of food and clean water. "I'll give it to you." "I'll give it to you too." "Buy mine." The miners hurriedly squeezed forward and took out the blood-red stones from their bodies. They were all pitifully small, and the biggest one was only as thick as a little finger. These people were all afraid that Ling Han would not be satisfied, so they all looked at him with hopeful eyes, afraid that he would say no. The food that Ling Han gave them was much more delicious than the food that the guards outside gave them. Ling Han's heart was filled with complicated emotions. It was only some food, yet it actually caused them to be so submissive. He distributed the food to everyone, and put away the oars. He could hold them in one hand, and there was very, very little of them. He held the oar in his hand and immediately felt the flower of martial art in his body become extremely greedy. It wanted to devour and absorb these stones. To be exact, it wanted to devour some kind of substance within the stones. Just at this time, 5 large men walked out from the mine. When they saw the food in everyone's hands, they immediately revealed ferocious expressions and shouted, "All of you, hand over the food." "Brother Yang, there's also a little girl," one of the large men said, pointing at Hunyo. A woman." Brother Yang immediately licked his lips when he mentioned Hunyo. "I like this kind of girl the most. I've been cooped up here for more than 10 days. Today, not only can I have a good meal, I can also have some fun." Ling Han sighed. In this mine, the ugliness of human nature was infinitely magnified. Living a life where there was no tomorrow, who couldn't release the evil in their hearts? Anyway, I don't have many days to live, so why not do as I please for once? This Brother Yang was obviously a typical example. However, this person's fate was really tough. He'd been here for more than 10 days, and his life still hadn't been taken. This was like the old saying, bad people live for 1,000 years. When it came to these 5 people, the miners were all trembling. These 5 people were notorious. It was said that before they came, they were already the tyrants of this area, but they still couldn't die. God was really too blind. They'd already fallen to such a state, but were still bullied by these scum. "Little beauty, big brother will take you to have some fun." Brother Yang stared at Hunyo, almost drooling. "If the heavens don't accept you, then I will," Ling Han said with a light humph. With a tap of his finger, Pu, a hole appeared on Brother Yang's forehead, piercing through the back of his head. Fresh blood spurted out, mixed with white brain matter. Everyone was stunned at first, then the 4 large men immediately screamed. If they didn't hear it with their own ears, it was really hard to imagine that 4 big men would actually scream like a sissy. They turned and fled, knowing that they'd encountered a tough opponent. "All of you stay." Ling Han flicked his finger, and 4 flashes of sword chi shot out. Pu, the 4 instantly fell to the ground, completely dead. The miners all looked at Ling Han with reverence in their eyes. They were also filled with gratitude. This was because if Ling Han had displayed his strength, they would definitely have answered him honestly. However, Ling Han chose to use food to exchange with them. It was clear that he was treating them like humans. So they were still people. The eyes of these miners burned with a hint of vigor. So they weren't walking corpses, waiting for death to descend. In Ling Han's eyes, he had already made up his mind. He would immediately go and communicate with the Fire Emperor and Na Ji Yen so that they would give up on the idea of continuing to mine the mine. Then, he would draw all the miners into the Black Tower, purify the curse on them, and let them leave. They were only some ordinary people, so how could they discover the secret of the Black Tower? They would only feel that they had slept, and then everything would return to normal. With his mind set, Ling Han walked back. The martial Dao immortal flower in his body was already reaching its limit, and it had a strong desire to devour these ores. Ling Han tried to refine the smallest of the ores, and a strange power was instantly extracted from the ore. This power entered his dantian, and was then absorbed by the martial Dao immortal flower. The vein-like patterns on the divine flower shone, and a surge of blood qi rose up, growing slightly. The extent was pitifully small, but Ling Han could be sure that the martial art divine flower had indeed grown a little. However, a bloodthirst also rose up in him, and he had the urge to use violence. This was very shocking. Chapter 526. Normal stones, with a sliver of source power. Small Tower quickly transmitted its thoughts to him. Normal. Ling Han was surprised. Able to directly increase flower blossom tier martial art cultivation, how could it be normal? If there were countless of these normal stones, it was guaranteed that even a pig could advance to the shattering void tier, and even becoming a god wasn't impossible. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call them divine stones, so how could they be normal? Origin power. Ling Han shook his head. Why don't I feel it? It's not origin power, but source power, Small Tower explained. Ling Han was startled, and said, like the chaos source rock source power. That's right, but the amount is pitifully small. I don't care to extract it, Small Tower said proudly. That's right. Ling Han bared his teeth. You're doing it on purpose, aren't you? He said, I don't mind if you give me some, the more the better. He didn't need to comprehend martial art, but his parents did. If there was a large amount of this ore, Ling Dongxing and Yu Hongchang would be able to smoothly break through to the flower blossom tier. He suddenly understood why the Fire Emperor was willing to pay any price to acquire these ores. It was because these ores would allow the Fire Emperor to make the great leap into the Dragon Gate even though he didn't have any skills. However, it would be a bit difficult to persuade the Fire Emperor to stop. Because this involved crossing a major tier and an additional 200 years of lifespan. Without entering the flower blossom tier, mortals only had a mere 100 years of lifespan, and the Fire Emperor had at least completed half of it. Stopping him from entering the flower blossom tier was equivalent to taking his life, so the Fire Emperor definitely wouldn't listen easily. If he wouldn't listen, then he could only beat him until he submitted. Ling Han thought violently. These ores also contain extremely violent factors. If you absorb too much, with your current cultivation, you definitely won't be able to control it. Your personality will change greatly, and you'll become a madman who only knows how to kill, Small Tower replied. Hearing this, Ling Han immediately dispelled the idea of giving his parents some ores, and said, even the Black Tower can't eliminate this emotion? Human nature is the hardest thing to fathom, unless I completely wipe away your memories, Small Tower suggested. Then forget it. Ling Han quickly shook his head. He did not want to erase his parents' memories and become a complete stranger. Moreover, he was very confident that he would be able to send his parents to the flower blossom tier as soon as possible. With an extra 200 years' time, he should be able to enter into the realm of immortals and obtain a divine pill for his parents, allowing them to ascend to the heavens in a single step. Ling Han was still full of confidence in his alchemy talent. Ling Han decided that after dealing with Na Zhiyan and the Fire Emperor, he would return to investigate this mine and see what exactly was hidden within it. The two of them quickly left the mine and walked towards the city wall. Stop! The guard shouted again. The order they had received was that no one was allowed to leave this place. Bo Wenlin also appeared, a cold smirk at the corner of his lips, and said, Youngster, you really don't know what's good for you, even daring to enter this mine of death. Now, you only have less than half a day to live. Ling Han smiled faintly. His fate was extremely tough, and unless he stayed in the mines for a few years, he would not be cursed. Moreover, even if he was really cursed, didn't he still have the Black Tower? This divine item had extraordinary abilities in the area of dispelling evil and curses. Since I only have half a day to live, then I have to make a big fuss, he said, pretending to be crazy. Bo Wenlin instantly looked wary. Previously, he had not made a move because he felt that Ling Han was not to be trifled with. And now, this guy who was not to be trifled with only half a day to live, which was even worse. Who would be willing to risk their lives against someone who was definitely going to die? Youngster, you are already a dead man, and I can't be bothered to lower myself to your level. However, I will follow you and watch you die, he said. Ling Han revealed a mischievous smile, and said, do you really dare to follow me wherever I go? Ha, there are places in this world that I, Bo Wenlin, do not dare to go. Bo Wenlin laughed coldly. Then come. Ling Han smiled, and strode forward in the direction of the imperial city. Meanwhile, Bo Wenlin also stopped the guards here. Otherwise, how could these people be a match for Ling Han? Ling Han did not walk quickly, and only entered the imperial city after about half an hour. Hurry, hurry, we've captured 2 female assassins, and are about to publicly execute them at the eastern gate. He had just entered when he heard passers-by rushing to report the news. They looked very excited, and many people followed them. Female assassins, and there were 2 of them. Could they be Lu Feng-er and her sister? Ling Han immediately changed his route, and also walked towards the eastern gate. How did these 2 women reveal their identity and whereabouts, and actually fall into the hands of the imperial family? He slightly quickened his pace, and in only a minute or 2, he arrived at the eastern gate. He saw that a high platform had been set up in a public square, and 2 women were currently pressed against the execution rack. Their hair was disheveled, and it was not clear what they looked like. However, with Ling Han's understanding of the 2 women's aura, he was certain that they were the Lu sisters. AI, were these 2 really made to be assassins? Someone at the side was loudly announcing the 2 women's crimes. They had attempted to assassinate an important official of the imperial court, Na Zhiyan, and had offended the authority of the heavens. They were to be executed as a warning to others. To execute these 2 beauties in front of everyone, and with such speed, it must have been because the Fire Emperor had forcefully excavated the mine, causing the people to be furious. Thus, he had intentionally executed these 2 women in such a high-profile manner to suppress the rebellious sentiment in the entire empire, especially in the imperial city. Assassinate Na Zhiyan? Tui. Those 2 girls must be good people. The heavens are blind. They actually didn't kill that damned Na Zhiyan. Instead, 2 good people died. Shu, lower your voice. Do you want to die? The crowd discussed fervently, expressing their sympathy for the Lu sisters, while hating Na Zhiyan to the bone. Ling Han did not immediately make a move to save them. He wanted the 2 women to learn from their mistakes and not become assassins in the future. They were not cut out for this. Bo Wenlin naturally followed along, and his face was filled with shock. This person who was about to die actually still had the mood to be executed. How thick did he have to be? The time has come. Execute. An executioner walked up the stage. He was bare-chested, and he held a huge machete in his hand. He drank a mouthful of wine, then sprayed it onto the blade of the machete. He raised it up high, and the body of the machete reflected a sorrowful color under the setting sun. The cultivation levels of the Lu sisters had obviously been sealed. To the majority of martial artists, once their cultivation levels were sealed, they would not be able to circulate their origin power to protect their bodies. As such, their defensive capabilities were actually not much higher than that of a normal person. This executioner was a poly-tier martial artist. With one chop of the machete, one of the sisters would definitely be beheaded. Shua, the machete chopped down. However, the scene of a severed head falling to the ground and blood splattering did not appear. Instead, a youth suddenly appeared on the stage, using one hand to stop the descending machete. Chapter 527. Thousand Worm, Ling Han frowned, revealing a strong expression of dread. Run, this big guy can't be fought with force. Why? Li Fengyu was indeed a blabbermouth, still maintaining a strong curiosity at this time. Your sister, run. Ling Han opened his large hand of origin power and grabbed everyone apart from Wenren Qian. He broke into a run, circling around and leaving this place. Wenren Qian naturally followed and ran. Even Ling Han and Jia Ming chose to run, so she wouldn't try to be brave. That long worm chased swiftly, its hundreds of legs striding in unison, surprisingly orderly. Its speed was also extremely fast, rapidly shortening the distance with Ling Han and the others. You too. Ling Han opened his large hand of origin power again and grabbed Wenren Qian, then used the thunderclap ninth heaven. Blazing white lightning flashed on his body, and his figure instantly accelerated, rapidly pulling apart the distance between him and the long worm. His current speed could rival heaven-tier warriors, and even if he brought along a few people, it was enough to reach the height of the deity transformation tier. In the end, that long worm finally gave up the chase and turned back, arriving at the place of ambush in the beginning. It entered a hole and quickly disappeared. Only then did Ling Han stop in his tracks, and put everyone down. "Brother-in-law, why do we have to run?" Li Fengyu still couldn't forget this question. Ling Han sighed, and said, "Thousand Worm never exists alone, since one appeared, then there's another one." Li Fengyu followed up. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Then there's another nest." "Pooh," Li Fengyu spurted out, and said, "There's actually another nest of such disgusting worms. 1,000 worm, a nest of at least 1,000, or else how could it have such a name? That one just now already had the strength of a middle-stage deity transformation tier, and this kind of demonic worm has extremely strong recovery ability, even harder to deal with than a high-stage deity transformation tier. If another nest is provoked, then it'll be fun," Ling Han said, shaking his head. "Then let's go, let's go." The women's expressions were unsightly. They obviously hated this kind of thing the most. Even Hunyou, for once, wasn't fond of fighting, mainly because that thing truly looked disgusting, making her unable to eat it. They bypassed the region, and then continued to chase after the sun. Ong! A beast's roar suddenly came from ahead, shocking the earth and making it tremble. "Heaven tier," Ling Han said to the others after a moment's explanation. "This place is truly dangerous," everyone said one after another. However, no one retreated. The more dangerous it was, the more astonishing the chance. Without the resolve to face death and come back alive, then what was the point of venturing out and taking risks? They'd just go home and spend their days mediocre. However, no one would deliberately throw away their lives, so they bypassed the place where the beast's roar came from. Previously, a shattering void tier elite entered here, and actually didn't slaughter these vicious creatures in passing, Li Fengyu mumbled. "Ha, these vicious creatures sense the presence of a shattering void tier elite, would they still dare to take a breather?" Ling Han said with a smile. Just like how they could only take a detour when they discovered a heaven tier beast, these beasts could only tuck their tails when they discovered a shattering void tier elite. After another while, a strange grassland appeared in front of them. It was especially green, somewhat out of place with the surrounding environment. Li Fengyu was just about to walk forward, but Ling Han reached out and grabbed him, forcibly dragging him back. "Brother-in-law, why are you dragging me?" he asked, puzzled. Ling Han sighed, and said, "If you spout any more nonsense, I'll throw you over." Li Fengyu finally became vigilant, and said, "Is this grassland abnormal? You try." Ling Han laughed loudly, and threw him out. "Help!" Li Fengyu hurriedly cried out, and hurriedly soared into the sky. At this moment, this even darker grassland also suddenly underwent a change. Strands of grass shrunk into the ground, and the earth trembled slightly. Peng! A large hand blasted out, grabbing towards Li Fengyu. "What the hell?" Li Fengyu exclaimed, and hurriedly turned his palm into a saber, slashing towards that large hand. Although he had a big mouth, his talent really wasn't weak, or else he wouldn't have been able to enter the Restore Heaven Academy. Attacking with full strength, martial intent spread out, and the saber chi blazed densely with vein-like patterns, extremely powerful. Peng, 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 but when these saber chi hit that large hand, it didn't cause the slightest bit of damage, and didn't even slow it down, continuing to grab towards Li Fengyu. Ling Han snorted, and used his fingers as a sword, slashing towards that large hand. Xiao, sword ray shocked the skies. That large hand didn't dare to let itself be hit, and instead clenched into a fist, meeting the sword ray head-on. Peng, martial intent collided, and sword ray shot out dazzlingly. Li Fengyu hurriedly ran back, shivering in fright. Hong, a colossus broke out of the earth. This was a giant that was 30 meters tall, and its back was covered in dark green grass. Obviously, this giant was lying on the ground earlier, and green grass grew on its body. Damn rock man, you dare ambush me! Li Fengyu shouted furiously, then turned around to look at Ling Han with a fawning expression. Young Master Han, exterminate it. This was a rock man, and its aura was terrifying because it was a deity transformation tier existence. Ling Han laughed loudly, summoned the rock man, and said, Big guy, this is your dish, get rid of it. When the rock spirit saw its own kind, it instantly let out a roar, but it wasn't a roar of joy, but a provocation. Creatures raised by the heavens and the earth like them, the process of growth was a war of mutually devouring each other, and definitely didn't have the pleasant surprise of seeing a fellow townsman. Ong! The large rock man also roared, but its roar was much more shocking than the small rock spirits. The roar formed a hurricane, blowing everyone's hair into a mess. The rock spirit instantly shriveled and shrunk behind Ling Han's back, whimpering like a frightened puppy. Earlier, it excitedly wanted to devour the other party, but when the other party showed its might, it suddenly discovered that the other party was much fiercer than it. Ling Han laughed loudly. The rock spirit was becoming more and more human-like. Did this guy still look like a rock spirit now? It was practically a puppy, wagging its tail and begging for pity, bullying the weak and fearing the strong. However, the Black Tower already condensed the first spirit stone, which was refined by the rock spirit. With 2 more, this big guy could advance into the spiritual infant tier. The large rock man stared at Ling Han, or to be precise, the rock spirit behind Ling Han was only blocked by Ling Han. It opened its mouth, and if it had saliva, it would definitely be dripping out by now. For it, the rock spirit was also a feast. It wouldn't say any nonsense, immediately pouncing towards Ling Han. In its eyes, Ling Han was only an ant, and it would crush over without hesitation, then devour the rock spirit, becoming the cornerstone for it to step onto a higher tier. The rock spirit obviously couldn't be this large rock man's opponent, so Ling Han attacked and took on this powerful opponent. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 528. Lord Bo, you're being naughty again, Ling Han said with a laugh. Xiao, Hunyo dashed out and threw a punch at Bo Wenlin's lower abdomen. Her battle prowess was astonishing, and she also had the advantage of 2 major tiers. Naturally, she was able to crush Bo Wenlin without any suspense. With a bang, Bo Wenlin was turned into a roasted lobster, his entire body curling up. Ling Han deliberately sighed, and said, Lord Bo, why do you have to do this? The supervisor's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. That was Bo Wenlin. His cultivation level was the same as his, and his strength was on par with his. In the Fire Nation, Bo Wenlin was an absolutely powerful figure, but he was actually knocked down by a single punch from a little girl. This was too ridiculous. If he went up, wouldn't he suffer the same fate? Hiss, where did these 2 monsters come from? Ling Han smiled at the supervisor, and said, Are you obedient? Yes, I'm very obedient. The supervisor hurriedly said. Hunyo was glaring at him fiercely, making his hair stand on end. Ling Han laughed loudly, and kicked Bo Wenlin to the supervisor's feet, and said, Here, you can take him back to complete your task. Make friends my ass. The prison officer was extremely furious at first, but after thinking about it carefully, how could there be any reason for old Ninth Bo to collude with a fugitive? Thus, he immediately believed Bo Wenlin's explanation. The other party had absolutely no relationship with Ling Han and the 2 female criminals. Bo Wenlin groaned. Hunyo's punch didn't take his life, but the little girl didn't hold back, hitting him so hard that his organs felt like they were flipped upside down, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. Now, he couldn't even speak, and only wanted to vomit. Ling Han waved at Bo Wenlin, and said, Lord Bo, aren't you going to follow me to the ends of the earth? don't be afraid." He strode off. The supervisor didn't dare to stop him, and hurriedly picked up Bo Wenlin and followed behind like a follower, making him feel very sullen. After walking for a while, Bo Wenlin finally recovered and could walk on his own, but with every step, his lower abdomen still ached painfully. He pulled open his clothes, and saw that his lower abdomen was bruised, and the center was already black. Hiss, this girl is so ruthless. Where are they going this time? Na Zhiyan's residence. Not good. The expressions on Bo Wenlin's and the warden's faces changed drastically. It was very easy to imagine that these two female criminals had been convicted for the assassination of Na Zhiyan. Since Ling Han was in cahoots with them, it was very normal for him to harbor thoughts of assassinating Na Zhiyan. Na Zhiyan was the favorite of the current Fire Emperor, and his power and influence were unparalleled. If Ling Han were to kill Na Zhiyan, the two of them, as people related to him, would definitely be implicated. Quickly go inform the other lords. The two of them exchanged a glance and hurriedly went their separate ways. Ling Han didn't walk very fast, as if he wanted to give them time to inform the others. He took his time, but he still arrived at the place after more than 20 minutes. Na Zhiyan's residence originally belonged to an imperial prince, but this imperial prince was very restless, and plotted to seize power. In the end, he was suppressed before he could do anything, and this residence was naturally confiscated. Now, it was given to Na Zhiyan, and it was obvious how much the emperor favored him. Shua, a group of soldiers walked out from the main doors, all of them holding sabers, spears, axes, and battle axes, looking very murderous. A person who looked like the leader also walked out with large strides. He wore a silver helmet on his head, and there was a long sword hanging from his waist, making him look very majestic. This person was actually in the spiritual pedestal tier. The great commander of our inner imperial guards, Si Kongzhen. How dare you, knave! Surrender immediately, he shouted loudly. Ling Han's eyes swept over him, and he said with a smile, Lord Bo, didn't you say that everything has been arranged for me, and that I only need to enter the residence and kill Na Zhiyan? Why is this different from what we agreed on? Little thief, don't pretend to be crazy. Si Kongzhen looked at Ling Han coldly, not daring to act rashly. He had already received a report that the little girl by Ling Han's side had knocked Bo Wenlin down with a single punch. It was incomparably strange, and he had no choice but to be cautious. Ling Han smiled and said, I am here to have a chat with that Na Zhiyan. There is no need for such a grand spectacle. Go ask that Na Zhiyan to come out. If we can talk things through, then everyone can still happily drink wine tonight. You're just a nobody. Do you think you're fit to meet that lord? Si Kongzhen said coldly. Ling Han sighed and said, these words are too hurtful, I don't like to hear it. Hunyo, what do you say? Fight. Hunyo waved her little fist. We'll use force to subdue others. What a violent little girl. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, you all heard it. We will use force to subdue others. Since that Na Zhiyan is unwilling to come out, then we can only barge in and drag him out for a discussion. Seeing that Ling Han was about to step forward, Si Kongzhen immediately moved to block his way. He directly drew his sword and slashed at Ling Han. He was an elite of the spiritual pedestal tier, and his power was far from what Bo Wenlin and the prison officer could compare with. With a wave of his sword, not only did 4 flashes of sword chi shoot out, there were also flashes of flames dancing in the air, appearing extremely terrifying. Nyo's little iron fist. Hunyo rushed out, and Peng, with a single punch, she sent Si Kongzhen flying. Pooh! Seeing this scene, everyone choked. That was Si Kongzhen, a super elite in the 7th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. In the whole of Fire Country, the number of people who were more powerful than him could be counted on 10 fingers. But now, he was actually sent flying with a single punch from a little girl. Who could believe this? Heavens, was this little girl a monster? What kind of cultivation level did she have to be able to do this? Moreover, this was only the little one. Ling Han had not even made a move yet. Pa, 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 pa applause rang out, and a white-robed man walked out from the manor. This man was tall and slender, and his appearance was so handsome that it was almost bewitching. His head full of black hair was like a spirit snake, actually moving without any wind. He looked at Ling Han, smiled, and said, "It is a pleasure to have a friend come from afar. I am Na Ji Yan, how should I address this friend?" There was a look of surprise in Ling Han's eyes. This Na Ji Yan was actually in the flower blossom tier. Strange, really strange. There was actually no true flower blossom tier cultivator in the 9 nations of the desolate north. The so-called flower blossom tier was only half a step into the flower blossom tier, and one could only enter this tier with the support of the power of the nation, transcending beyond mortals. However, how strong one's battle prowess was, and how much their lifespan had been increased, was a completely different matter. Aside from a domineering figure like the Rain Emperor, Ling Han really did not believe that there was a genius in the 9 nations of the desolate north that could take that step. But this Na Ji Yan in front of him was a genuine flower blossom tier cultivator, and definitely did not rely on the support of the power of the nation. With this kind of power, he actually came to the desolate north to become an important official? Ling Han immediately understood. Na Ji Yan had to be heading for that mine. Painstakingly plotting to incite the Fire Emperor to reopen that deadly ancient mine, he was naturally not doing it for the ores that would make people go crazy. Most likely, it was for the cursed tool that was sealed underneath. It was more refreshing to read on one's phone. Chapter 529. Na Ji Yan, I am really very curious what is buried beneath that mine that would make you, a flower blossom tier cultivator, to not hesitate to become a favorite official and offer advice to a spiritual pedestal tier cultivator, Ling Han said. Hiss. Instantly, everyone was shocked. Na Ji Yan was actually in the flower blossom tier. Impossible, right? Definitely impossible. These words came from the mouth of an 18 or 19-year-old youth, so how could they be convincing? Meanwhile, Na Ji Yan smiled, and said, "A flower blossom tier cultivator at such a young age like you, this is the first time I've seen one. Not to say that there will never be another like you in the future, but at least you are unprecedented." This time, a great many people fell to the ground. Ling Han was also in the flower blossom tier. Weren't these two people flattering each other endlessly? How old was this youth? 20 at most. In the desolate north, people of this age would at most be in the gushing spring tier. Moreover, how difficult was it to cross the barrier of the flower blossom tier? Even if you were given 20 years, you might not be able to succeed, not to mention that this brat had only lived for such a long time. But Bo Wan Lin felt a chill in his heart, because he remembered that he had once been stared at by Ling Han to the point that his whole body went limp. This kind of power was definitely terrifyingly strong. What if Ling Han really was in the flower blossom tier? Forget about avenging his son. This might even cause the entire Bo clan to lose. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Sir, you are really surprised by your lack of experience. There may not be a flower blossom tier cultivator as young as me in this generation, but there might not be one in history. However, there is a gap in our history, and we are completely lacking in understanding of the events of 10,000 years ago." "You are right, sir." Na Ji Yan nodded, then changed the topic, and said, "However, a flower blossom tier cultivator at such a young age like sir, I believe there is no second person in this world who can compare to you." "Nyo Nyo, he's looking down on you," Ling Han said to Hu Nyo with a smile. Hit. Hu Nyo's figure flashed, and she had already disappeared from everyone's sight. Xiao, she appeared in front of Na Ji Yan, and her small fist shot out. She never used any martial arts techniques. She only used her fists, claws, and teeth. These 3 skills were enough to travel the world. Na Ji Yan instantly gave a muffled humph. He had not expected Hunyo's speed to be so fast. No, 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 he had never thought that such a little girl would actually be a martial artist. Moreover, he had sensed it the moment she made her move. No matter what, this power had to be at the level of the flower blossom tier. If he were to take this punch, he would probably not die, but his lower body would probably explode. It couldn't be helped. Hunyo was too short, so where would her punch land? Though Na Zhiyan's appearance was bewitchingly beautiful, he was definitely not an idiot. How could he possibly dare to allow Hunyo to hit that spot? He hurriedly stretched out his hand and formed an ice wall in front of him. On the surface of the ice, numerous ancient characters flickered. This kind of vein pattern is really rare. Ling Han found it strange. Vein lines were the embodiment of martial arts willpower. Although the majority of people's vein lines were not the same, they could always be traced back to the source. For example, in the vast lands, all cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques were derived from over 100 ancient techniques, and one could find a corresponding similarity between them. However, his opponent's vein-like patterns were extremely unfamiliar. They were definitely derived from a completely different ancient technique. Strange, this person's background was strange, and his intentions were also very strange. Peng, Hunyo's fist landed on the layer of ice. Ka. Cracks immediately appeared on the layer of ice, and then shattered into pieces. However, this also bought Na Zhiyan enough time to retreat. However, Hunyo continued to attack, forcing Na Zhiyan to retreat continuously. Layer after layer of ice walls appeared, and shattered piece by piece. One retreated in a hurry, while the other charged even faster. In the end, it was Hunyo who had the upper hand against Na Zhiyan, not giving him the slightest chance to retaliate. Hang! Na Zhiyan was finally angered. With a cold humph, the strange image of a rising tide appeared behind him. He suddenly opened his mouth, and a water arrow actually shot out from his mouth. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the water arrow was also covered with ancient characters. This was not a normal water arrow, but one that was filled with destructive power, enough to pose a threat to flower blossom tier elites. Hunyo's figure finally flashed, and then she turned around, dodging this attack. At the same time, this gave Na Zhiyan enough time to finally stabilize his footing and turn the tables for the first time. Na Zhiyan's face was filled with shock, and he said, "How could this be, such a young flower blossom tier?" A flower blossom tier elite that was not even 20 years old was already enough to shock him so much that his eyeballs almost fell out, what more when Hunyo only looked like she was 5 or 6 years old. Even if she had been able to cultivate since she was in her mother's womb, so what? The others almost fainted. The moment the two of them exchanged blows, the aura of the flower blossom tier was completely revealed, causing everyone to feel a sense of reverence from the bottom of their hearts. This was the flower blossom tier. In terms of life, they had already transcended mortality. Aside from king tiers of martial arts, this kind of aura was absolutely suppressive to others. This time, they had to believe it even if they did not want to. Whether it was Na Zhiyan, Ling Han, or even a little girl of 5 or 6 years old, they were all in the flower blossom tier. There was no justice, there was really no justice. When did flower blossom tier elites become so worthless? 3 of them suddenly appeared, and 2 of them were so young. Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, "Frog at the bottom of a well, now you know what it means by there's always someone stronger, right?" Hunyo bared her teeth at Na Zhiyan. She had not even used her strongest weapon yet. Na Zhiyan's shocked expression was still unsettled, and he asked, "Are you the disciples of the Heaven Sword sect, or the brilliant disciples of the Cloud Phoenix sect?" "Neither." Ling Han shook his head. "There's no need to guess our origins. I have only come to say one thing, and that is to immediately stop the excavation of the ancient mine. Forgive me for not being able to comply." Na Zhiyan similarly shook his head. Young man, no matter which party you come from, you must not interfere in this matter. This is a warning, or else the only thing that awaits you is death. Oh, so it's really that exciting. Ling Han laughed loudly, then all the more reason for me to play. Na Zhiyan's expression was filled with displeasure, and he asked, what do you think of my abilities? Not much. I can suppress you in 3 moves, Ling Han said casually. Na Zhiyan was almost angered to death. He forcefully suppressed his anger, and said, where I come from, there are at least 80,000 if not 100,000 people at my level. There are at least 10 or 20,000 people stronger than me. Hiss, the faces of those people from Fire Country twitched. What kind of terrifying force was this? Flower Blossom tier elites actually numbered in the hundreds of thousands. It had to be known that in the whole of Fire Country, only the old emperor from 2 generations ago had managed to advance into the Flower Blossom tier by relying on power of the nation. Moreover, the power of the nation could only nurture 1 Flower Blossom tier elite. Moreover, there were people stronger than the Flower Blossom tier, as many as 10 to 20,000. Too terrifying. What kind of power was that? Ling Han nodded and said, then I'm really curious, where are you from? This has nothing to do with you. You only need to know that if you become my enemy, you will die without a proper burial, Na Zhiyan said coldly. Nyo, do you think we've grown up scared? Ling Han suddenly asked Hunyo. No, Hunyo said crisply. What if someone threatens us? Ling Han asked again. Beat him until he submits, and use violence to subdue him, Hunyo said in a very violent manner. Chapter 530. Ling Han turned to Na Zhiyan, smiled, and said, our slogan is to subdue others with violence. If you are not convinced, we will beat you until you are convinced. Na Zhiyan's expression became even colder, and he said, young man, do not be rash. How about this? He had not even finished his sentence when Ling Han had already charged over. Leaping high into the air, he aimed a kick at Na Zhiyan's face. As the saying went, do not hit a person's face in a fight. Not only did Ling Han want to hit his face, he even used his foot to kick him. This was really looking down on him too much. Junior, you are too arrogant. Na Zhiyan said angrily. He raised his hand to block Ling Han's attack. Hong! 7 icicles spread out, and cold air filled the air. In an instant, the temperature dropped by several dozen degrees, and shards of ice continuously formed in the air and fell down. There were ancient patterns on the icicles that moved, forming one character after another, as if the 7 icicles had all become divine weapons. Na Zhiyan smirked coldly. Unless you are an expert in leg techniques, if you use your weakness to attack your opponent's strength, then you will suffer greatly. Pang! This kick landed, and the icicles instantly shattered, turning into shards of ice that danced in the air. Meanwhile, Ling Han's foot was not affected in the slightest, and continued to kick fiercely at Na Zhiyan's face. How could this be? Though Na Zhiyan did not cry out in shock, his face showed such an expression. He was too shocked. Just how much of a gap was there between the two of them for such a one-sided result to appear? Pang! In the nick of time, Ling Han's foot landed fiercely, landing squarely on Na Zhiyan's face. Under the powerful impact, Na Zhiyan instantly fell to the ground. His entire head was stomped into the green stone path, as if he was a headless monster. Hiss, this was too tragic. A mighty flower blossom tier cultivator was actually abused like this. Pang! Crushed stones flew everywhere. Na Zhiyan shot up, his face ashen. In this tiny little desolate north, he actually suffered such humiliation, practically giving him the urge to commit suicide. Thankfully, the people from his own party had not arrived, or else he would really be too ashamed to face anyone. Xiao! Pang! Just as he said one word, he was immediately kicked away by Ling Han, and his head was once again buried into the bluestone road. Sympathy flashed across everyone's faces. Flower blossom tier elites were high above in everyone's hearts, as if they were gods, but now they were in such a miserable state, repeatedly having their heads stepped on by others. They really didn't know what to say. Na Zhiyan broke through the ground a second time, but like before, he only managed to say one sentence before he was stomped back into the ground by Ling Han's foot. 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. After the 10th time, Na Zhiyan finally understood that he was completely not a match for Ling Han. Hence, it was better for him to be more obedient. Not only did he not break out of the ground, but he also did not make a sound. He looked like a scoundrel who wanted to bite him if he wanted to be an ostrich. AI, being a flower blossom tier elite to this extent, what a disgrace. But everyone knew that it was because Ling Han was too powerful. In terms of battle prowess, he completely suppressed Na Zhiyan. What could Na Zhiyan do? Fun. Hunyo clapped at the side, then swept a threatening glance over the crowd, and said discontentedly, "Why didn't Nyo hear any applause?" Pa, 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 pa. Everyone hurriedly clapped. This little girl was not someone they could afford to offend. Ling Han smiled slightly, squatted on the ground, and said, "Then, milord, can we talk peacefully now?" Na Zhiyan wanted to cry, but had no tears. He had always wanted to resolve this peacefully, but you were so violent, first letting a little girl go on top, and then himself, going on top so many times. But faced with these two violent people, how could he dare to protest? He hurriedly slapped the ground, expressing his agreement to talk peacefully. Then talk properly. Don't bury your head so low, I will mistakenly think that you have something against me. Oh, right, you wouldn't have something against me, right? Ling Han asked with a smile. Na Zhiyan pulled his head out, hurriedly shook his head, and said, I wouldn't dare, I wouldn't dare. Wouldn't dare or wouldn't dare? Ling Han asked, smiling. Wouldn't dare, and wouldn't dare. Na Zhiyan was smart this time. Ling Han patted his shoulder, and said, This is a very good start, and I am very satisfied. You'd better let me continue to be satisfied. Otherwise, if I am not satisfied, you will feel terrible. I understand, I understand. Na Zhiyan hurriedly nodded. Tell me about your background first. Ling Han was very curious. Na Zhiyan's martial art inheritance seemed to be very different from the orthodoxies of the world. Na Zhiyan hesitated. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, Actually, I can still search your soul. Na Zhiyan's face instantly turned green. If his soul was searched, then his soul would disappear, and he would be as dead could be. Searching one's soul was definitely not a technique that a flower blossom tier cultivator could use, but the problem was, which flower blossom tier cultivator would be as young as Ling Han and Hunyo? Thus, he would rather believe it. I come from the sea race, he hurriedly said. Sea race. Ling Han was surprised. In both his last life and this life, he had never heard of the sea race, so where did this force come from? Wait, outside the desolate north was the sea, and the sea race was a race that lived in the sea. Na Zhiyan nodded, and without waiting for Ling Han to ask, he began to explain, Actually, most of the regions of the world are the sea. I come from the North Sea, and there are also the East Sea, the West Sea, the South Sea, and the Central Sea. No wonder Na Zhiyan had said that there were 100,000 flower blossom tier cultivators there, and 10 to 20,000 stronger than flower blossom tier cultivators. The 100,000 flower blossom tier cultivators you speak of, do you mean the entire sea, or only your North Sea? Ling Han asked. We are from the North Sea, Na Zhiyan answered honestly. Ling Han's expression changed slightly. Though he had not been to the Middle State and the other 3 regions, he roughly estimated that there were only 100,000 flower blossom tier cultivators in 1 state and 4 regions of the world, and the North region had the least, perhaps not even 10,000. But just the North Sea alone had 100,000 flower blossom tier cultivators. If the power of the 5 sea regions was equal, then how powerful would the sea race be? Among your sea race, which sea region is the strongest? He asked. Naturally the Central Sea. That is the place where the Sea Emperor stands guard, a place that all the sea race yearns to go to, Na Zhiyan said, filled with longing. Tell me more specifically about the level of your North Sea's martial art, Ling Han continued to ask. Since Na Zhiyan had already spoken, he had no intention of hiding anything. He said, our North Sea is naturally led by the North Sea royal clan, and beneath them are many general clans. Seeing Ling Han glare at him, he hurriedly added, the general clan has at least an elite of the deity transformation tier standing guard, while the royal clan has at least an elite of the heaven tier. It is said that a few kings have even advanced into the shattering void tier, and are the strongest beings in the world. Shattering void tier. Ling Han could not help but feel rueful. How important it was to be born in a good era. In his last life, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was sparse, and the environment for martial art was harsh. Even freaks like the Sword Emperor could only be trapped in the heaven tier. And with his talent in alchemy, if it was in the current era, he could definitely use alchemy to advance into the shattering void tier, or even become a god. The current him definitely did not have the right to stand against an elite of the shattering void tier. Chapter 531. Peng, the earth split open, and a gigantic demonic beast drilled out. It was shaped like a lion, 30 meters long and 15 meters tall, and its whole body was covered with black scales, making it look like a pangolin. However, its tail was completely different. It was long, and the tip was like a corn cob. It exuded a faint fragrance, like an exceptional precious medicine. And what was familiar to everyone was that why did that tail look so much like that spiritual medicine? Ling Han's expression changed drastically. Previously, that wasn't a precious medicine at all, but rather a bait that this demonic beast had released. It deliberately let its tail change slowly, like a precious medicine that was slowly maturing. Its purpose was to gather the largest number of prey, so that it could catch them all in one go. This could also explain why those shattering void tier elites didn't pay attention to this precious medicine when they passed by earlier, because they didn't notice it at all. This was a powerful existence of the shattering void tier, and here, it was invincible. The 7 great heaven tier elites all stopped fighting, and when they saw this scene, they naturally reacted. However, being targeted by a shattering void tier elite and turned into prey, how could they escape? Ong! This demonic beast let out a loud roar. Hung, the sound waves were like a tsunami. Peng, 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 everything within a radius of a few miles nearby was shattered. The 7 great heaven tier elites were obviously the first to bear the brunt. All of them were shaken to the point that their skin broke and their bones cracked, and they barely had a breath left. Fortunately, it was precisely because the 7 great heaven tier elites started fighting that the others retreated far away to avoid the brunt of the attack, so they were spared from this disaster. Even so, everyone's arms were either severed or legs were severed, just that they weren't shaken into pieces. The might of the shattering void tier was incomparably powerful, and a single attack could slash down stars. Fortunately, Ling Han and the others retreated even further, and were practically unaffected. However, they were still pressured by the shattering void tier's aura to the point that their faces turned pale, and even breathing was difficult. Everyone's expression changed. How could they block this? A shattering void tier demonic beast targeted them, and wanted to treat them as prey. Run! Everyone almost instantly scattered and fled in all directions. That demonic beast also moved. It first inhaled, and swallowed all 7 heaven tier elites into its mouth. With a few crunching sounds, it swallowed them into its stomach, and then began a massacre. Although everyone fled in all directions, how fast was the shattering void tier's speed? When it finished eating all the prey, in the east, south, and west directions, the furthest those who fled towards the north had only escaped over 100 miles. This was obviously Ling Han and his party. The Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing were also among them, and there were also super geniuses like Yao Huiyu and Jia Ming. They all coincidentally chose the path they had come from, because if they fled in this direction, it was the most likely that they would encounter reinforcements. Ling Han sighed inwardly. Wanting to compete in speed with shattering void tier elites was a dream. Perhaps he could only use the Black Tower to save those he cared about. At most, he would temporarily not let some people out. The gold-seeking rat was so scared that it pretended to be dead again. Chapter 532. The formation was ever-changing, and some of them focused on confusion, trapping people to death. Some were killing arrays, and once one entered the array, one would encounter endless killing intent. On the other hand, there were some formations that focused on defense, like an iron bucket. Great mountain protection arrays usually focused on defense, and this one in the Fire Country's Imperial Palace was exactly like that. Although it was a level 6 array, it would be very difficult for even a spiritual infant tier cultivator to forcibly break through. That was because once a gap was opened, it would very quickly close up. Unless one's power was strong enough to blast open a huge gap, only then would one be able to pass through easily. That would require at least the power of the middle stage of the spiritual infant tier. Ling Han's battle prowess was very awesome, but he was still unable to break through the limits of the spiritual infant tier. Thus, he could not possibly barge into this great formation by force, but this was a completely different matter from deciphering the formation. With the Eye of Truth, this formation had no secrets to speak of in front of him. The simplest way to break it is to destroy a few of the formation eyes inside. However, the formation eyes are in the formation, so this is contradictory, unless someone cooperates from the inside. However, there is a slightly more troublesome way to crack it, and that is to attack a few weak points at the same time to create a temporary gap. Ling Han murmured as the phenomena of the sun, moon, and stars surged in his eyes. I'll use the annihilating dragon star arrow to attack those 7 points at the same time. I believe I'll be able to open up a huge gap. He took a deep breath, opened his hands, and made a bow. Suddenly, 7 spots of light appeared and turned into 7 arrowheads. Then, the arrowheads, which were intertwined with white light, also appeared. They were densely burning with characters, which also did not belong to the current cultivation system. They emitted an ancient and terrifying aura. The combination of the Eye of Truth and the annihilating dragon star arrow was simply a perfect match. Inexplicably, everyone in the palace felt an endless chill, as if they would suffer a terrible mishap in the next second. Xiao, Ling Han released the 5 fingers of his right hand, and 7 light arrows immediately shot toward the formation. As soon as they were shot, the 7 light arrows flew in 7 different directions. They were so fast that no one could catch the trajectory of the light arrows. This kind of speed was simply killing whoever it hit, because under normal circumstances, who would constantly use their elemental energy to protect themselves. Weng, weng, weng. The arrow arrived, but it did not directly hit the Imperial Palace. A curtain suddenly appeared in the sky, blocking the arrow. However, this curtain of light seemed to be made of porcelain. Countless cracks appeared on it, and it suddenly shattered. Ling Han revealed a sliver of a smile. Under his Eye of Truth, this great formation immediately became so weak that it could not withstand a single blow, and was directly destroyed by his 7 arrows. Of course, this was also because of the power of the annihilating dragon star arrow. Otherwise, even if they found the flaw, they might not be able to break through it. After all, this flaw was only a relatively weak point. It was not something that could be blasted apart by any attack. However, the eye of the formation was not destroyed. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged in and began to rebuild the formation. Let's go. Ling Han did not have the time to practice his archery here, and immediately brought Hun Yo with him into the imperial city. At this time, even if the formation was activated again, it would be useless. More territory and more population would bring about a stronger power of the nation. Then, Fire Country would also be able to produce more powerful flower blossom tier elites. Even if the ancient mine was emptied, the power of the nation wouldn't be emptied, and the foundation of Fire Country would be passed down through the ages. This was too important, so the old emperor was naturally hesitant. All right, this old man agrees. Only an instant later, the old emperor nodded in agreement. If he couldn't even pass this hurdle before him, how could he talk about the future? Ling Han said indifferently, I hope you're not doing it half-heartedly, or else. He drew out the demon birth sword, and with a slash, 19 flashes of sword chi shot out. Each flash of sword chi was filled with ancient characters. This was the bone pattern he obtained from the old vicious mongoose, which could increase one's attack power, and could practically be considered a mystical power. He slashed towards the sky, and a terrifying scene appeared. It was as if the sky was being torn apart, and a black void actually appeared. It was too terrifying. The might of this strike was so strong that it was impossible to fathom. Everyone trembled. 19 flashes of sword chi. Was this guy really human? 10 flashes of chi made him a top-notch king tier, so what kind of concept was 19 flashes? In the flower blossom tier, he was definitely invincible. This time, the old emperor completely dispelled his naive idea of pretending to agree to Ling Han's request, stalling for time, and waiting for 8 or 10 flower blossom tier warriors to appear in the future to fight against Ling Han. Not to mention 8 or 10, even 80, or 100 would be a gift. I wouldn't dare. He lowered his stance to an extremely low level. Ling Han nodded, turned around, and left. He wanted to properly interrogate Na Zhiyan. Chapter 533. When Ling Han arrived at the city gates, he entered the Black Tower with Hun Yo and began to interrogate Na Zhiyan again. He wanted to know more about the sea race. Inside the Black Tower, Na Zhiyan naturally had even less of a chance to resist. Whatever Ling Han asked, he would answer honestly, not daring to hide anything in the slightest. The general that Na Zhiyan obeyed was called Xian Kongyun, and the Xian clan was also an extremely powerful existence among the general clans of the North Sea. This Xian Kongyun was an important member of the Xian clan, and was in the deity transformation tier. According to the information that Na Zhiyan had privately gathered, this Xian Kongyun was very ambitious. Why did Xian Kongyun not send anyone else, but only Na Zhiyan? Firstly, Na Zhiyan had a special ability. Sea beasts were naturally good at bewitching, and could subdue their enemies without even fighting. In fact, they could even bewitch their enemies without them realizing it. For example, the Fire Emperor should know the consequences of forcefully opening the ancient mine. It could possibly shake the foundation of a nation, and ruin the power of the nation. However, he still stubbornly persisted, dreaming of breaking through to the flower blossom tier. On one hand, this was indeed a great temptation, and on the other hand, it had a great deal to do with Na Zhiyan's bewitchment. Secondly, Xian Kongyun obviously did not want to alarm others, even the members of the Xian clan. Regarding the ancient mine and the mysterious curse tool, he should have learned about it from some ancient text, and wanted to keep it for himself. This could be ascertained from the fact that he only sent Na Zhiyan. Even if it was just one person, it would be relatively easy for him to silence them. Ling Han was even more curious. A treasure that could cause an elite of the deity transformation tier to spend so much effort to obtain it had to be shockingly valuable. He could be sure that the bottle was definitely the cursed tool that Small Tower spoke of, but what was its use? It was simple. He would know once he dug it out. Ling Han's fate was extremely tough, and added with the existence of the Black Tower, he did not need to worry about the problem of being cursed, and could completely do as he pleased in the ancient mine. Furthermore, he still had one more thing to do, and that was to bring the miners into the Black Tower to wash away the power of the curse. He arrived at the ancient mine, and by then, imperial guards had already arrived, bringing with them the orders of the Fire Emperor. From this day onwards, the ancient mine would be immediately closed, and everything would be left to Ling Han's arrangements. Ling Han had all the miners gather in the upper area. Then, he unleashed the aura of the flower blossom tear to knock them out, and then drew them into the Black Tower. When he had drawn everyone into the Black Tower, he left the ancient mine and tossed them out. As for when they would wake up and how they would react, Ling Han could not be bothered. "Young Master Han, you really can't make an enemy of Lord Kong Yun." Na Zhiyan was on the verge of tears. "I have to report the progress to Lord Kong Yun every 10 days, and tomorrow is the day to report. Lord Kong Yun is already rather dissatisfied with the current progress. If we continue to delay, it is hard to guarantee that Lord Kong Yun will not come personally. At that time, we will be in deep trouble. An elite of the deity transformation tier could kill a spiritual infant tier cultivator with a single thought. No matter how freakish Ling Han was, he couldn't possibly stand against them. So fast." Ling Han frowned. If a deity transformation tier elite really came, how could he resist for so many days? The two immortal corpses had already lost too much of their immortal level pressure. Now, they would probably only be able to suppress flower blossom tier cultivators, which was meaningless to him. Did he still need help to deal with flower blossom tier cultivators? "Young Master Han, for the sake of our lives, don't bother with this matter." "You can't, anyway," Na Zhiyan advised. Moreover, he had a guess. Even Xian Kong Yun, who was in the deity transformation tier, was so heavy, so the effect of that bottle was definitely above the deity transformation tier. That would naturally be terrible. If the news really leaked out, perhaps even the royal family would make a move. Ling Han shook his head. This ancient mine definitely couldn't be excavated anymore, and the threat of a deity transformation tier cultivator couldn't be ignored. How about this? He could get his hands on that cursed tool, and let that deity transformation tier cultivator chase after him. In any case, he was going to the middle state. The boundaries were a natural barrier, and a deity transformation tier cultivator's power would be greatly weakened if he went there. Moreover, in the middle state, deity transformation tier cultivators really couldn't be considered a very powerful existence. It was decided then. Ling Han was going to activate that cursed tool in the first place, and now he was naturally even more anxious. He returned to the ancient mine, and went deep into the depths, searching together with Hunyo. The ancient mine was a very special place. Cursed chi that was like threads of blood rose up, preventing divine sense from spreading out, causing Ling Han to be unable to detect things that were too far away. However, because he knew that it was very likely that the bottle was the source of the cursed chi, Ling Han also had a solution, and that was to head towards the place where the cursed chi was the strongest. When he found the place, he would continue to dig downwards. In terms of digging, he was definitely more efficient than 10,000 miners put together. What kind of power did flower blossom tier cultivators have? Regardless of whether it was rock or soil underneath, they would all be broken open. Furthermore, there was no need to waste any effort to move the soil that was dug out. Instead, they could all be tossed into the Black Tower. The space inside was ridiculously large, and who knew how many mountains, rivers, and seas could be stored in it. The effect was naturally astonishingly high. After only a little less than half a day, the chi that rose up from below was as red as blood. With just a touch, their skin turned blood red, and a strong violent impulse arose in their hearts, wanting to kill all living things. This had a great effect. In just a short while, both Ling Han and Hunyo felt the pressure, and hurriedly entered the Black Tower to take a breather. This isn't the power of a curse, but a great elite might have died here. He had a violent nature, and has been affecting this place for a long time, Small Tower said. Ling Han frowned, and said, "What you mean is that there is not only a cursed tool here, but also the corpse of a great elite might be buried here." Perhaps that person was killed by the cursed tool, Small Tower speculated. After staying in the Black Tower for a long time, the terrifying violent impulse in their bodies finally disappeared. The two of them once again exited the Black Tower, and continued to dig downwards. Hunyo was obviously an expert, and her little claws were extremely sharp. Such strong resentment. After digging for another 10 minutes or so, Ling Han was suddenly shocked, feeling as if something had drilled into his body. It was strange, and made him feel an indescribable threat. Was this the power of a curse? It wouldn't immediately take someone's life, but it would imperceptibly affect them, and finally cause them to die suddenly. A bottle. Hunyo said, pointing at the ground. Ling Han nodded, and a bottle's mouth was revealed there. He hurriedly continued to dig, and soon, this bottle was completely revealed. It was only a foot tall, very slender, and made of jade. Even if it had been buried in the ground for many years, it wouldn't be damaged in the slightest. There were many patterns on the bottle's body, which should be some kind of martial art intent, in the direction of a curse. He wanted to pick up the jade bottle, but when he tried, he actually couldn't pick it up. It's grown roots. He exerted a bit more force, and the jade bottle was finally picked up. However, a blood-colored fountain also gushed out, and an incredibly terrifying aura spread out. Even if Ling Han had the divine sense of the heaven tier, he still trembled as if a great calamity was about to befall him. Let's go. He put away the jade bottle, hurriedly grabbed Hunyo, and flew upwards. Chapter 534. Hong, the blood-colored fountain grew fiercer and fiercer. At first, it was only a fountain pillar as thick as an arm, but it soon became as thick as a person and as thick as a well. Finally, it seemed to become a heavenly spring, the blood waves surging as if to drown the whole world. Ling Han flew upwards with all his might. Below him, the water level was rising rapidly, almost catching up to his feet. Under the terrifying corrosive power, his shoes began to disintegrate, then his socks, and his feet also became extremely itchy. Layers of skin fell off as if his flesh and blood were about to melt, leaving only a skeleton. This was too terrifying. It was just some mist that evaporated, and the corrosive power had reached such a degree. If he was swallowed by the blood waves, could he still survive? One had to know that he cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and his body was like precious metal of the same level. If it was another flower blossom tier cultivator, he would probably have turned into a pool of blood by now. Ling Han hurriedly stored Hunyo into the Black Tower, and desperately flew upwards. Could it be that this place was originally a great formation, and the jade bottle was the eye of the formation, the core? Now that he took away the eye of the formation, the great formation stopped operating, and the thing suppressed inside immediately ran out. Then didn't he cause a great disaster? Thankfully, everyone here was moved away, or else the original miners here would have been drowned by the blood sea. Peng, Ling Han soared into the sky, and he was already above the ancient mine. A pillar of blood soared into the sky, reaching at least 30 meters high before it began to fall. A large amount of blood surged, and in an instant, the entire ancient mine became a lake. As far as the eye could see, it was a field of blood red. Ling Han stood at the side of the lake and held his breath. This bloody water carried a strong fishy smell, as if it had just experienced a massacre. This smell was especially stimulating, making him feel as if he was about to transform into a demon, desiring to slaughter the entire world. Was this really a pool of blood? If it was, then how many people had died? Ling Han couldn't help but feel numb. He was very clear about how huge the ancient mine was, but he didn't know how big the space sealed under the jade bottle was. But just to fill the area of the ancient mine, the blood of 10 million people wasn't enough. You guessed wrong. At most, there is only the blood of a dozen or so people here, Small Tower suddenly said. How is this possible? Ling Han immediately cried out. If there were only a dozen people, then how big would they be? Would they be as big as a mountain? The higher a martial artist's strength is, the more blood and chi they will have. A little bit of blood can turn into an ocean. What's so strange about that? Small Tower countered. This blood only comes from a dozen or so different sources, and at most, it comes from a dozen or so people. Ling Han wanted to say something, but he was startled. He saw a white light in the middle of the blood lake. Following that, a white corpse floated up to the surface of the lake. It was a man, and he was definitely handsome when he was alive. At this moment, he was dressed in white, and there was a wound on his chest. His heart had directly exploded. Another corpse appeared. It was a bald man wearing earthy yellow clothes. There were 9 holes on his head, and a string of beads hung in front of his chest. He was dressed very strangely. He was also the same. There was a hole in his chest, and his heart had been exploded. Is this the legendary ancient monk? Ling Han had heard of the ancient monk's attire before. They forbade meat and slaughter, and had strict rules and precepts. The third corpse appeared. This was an incredibly beautiful woman wearing a long red dress. In this place, the long dress and the blood were one, and it was impossible to tell the difference between the dress and the blood. It was not that her heart had been exploded, but rather that there was a bloody hole on her jade-white forehead, which had caused her to die. She was truly an enchanting beauty. Anyone who saw her would sigh in pity. Then, there was the fourth corpse. Ling Han counted. There were a total of 12 corpses. They seemed to have been suppressed underground before, and now they were released all at once. Ling Han had a deep understanding of how terrifying the corrosiveness of this blood was, but these corpses had actually not been corroded even after being buried for thousands or tens of thousands of years. Instead, they looked as if they had been alive. Just what cultivation level had they been at back then? Were heaven tier elites this strong? Ling Han was uncertain. He now only had a sliver of divine sense of the heaven tier, and could only make guesses about existences of the same cultivation level back then, and was unable to obtain an accurate answer. Perhaps these people were even existences of the shattering void tier. The problem was, although these people died from being struck in different vital spots, there was one similarity, and that was that they were all killed by someone's fist. Being punched in the heart, and being punched in the head, it was as if they were facing a supreme god, and could only be killed in an instant. The blood of the 12 peerless experts turned into a lake of blood. What? Ling Han revealed a look of shock. A mountain-like silver spider actually appeared on the surface of the lake. Each of its feet was like a heavenly spear, and the aura it emitted was extremely terrifying, making him feel as if he was made of porcelain, and now, under the impact, multiple cracks appeared. This was not an illusion. Ling Han lowered his head, and felt that cracks had already appeared on his hands, and beads of blood were gushing out. Moreover, there were more and more of them, forming a straight line that continuously fell down. Too terrifying. Just standing there from afar, it made him almost collapse. Heaven tier elites couldn't reach such a level, and this heaven and earth only allowed the extreme power of the shattering void tier, so this silver spider had to be a shattering void tier existence. This large silver spider only glanced at Ling Han, but there was no color in its eyes at all. It was high and mighty, like an invincible creature. It indeed didn't need to look down on Ling Han, because the two of them weren't on the same level at all. Just like when Ling Han met a normal person, did he need to show his superiority by looking down on the ladder? With just this one glance, Ling Han discovered that his body was about to explode, and his soul was similarly about to explode. Perhaps, Ling Han had to return to the heaven tier to be able to resist such an aura, but it was merely an aura. Just at this moment, a huge whirlpool suddenly appeared in the lake of blood, and the water level immediately began to drop at a rapid pace. In just a few breaths' time, the blood-colored lake water had completely disappeared, and those 12 corpses naturally disappeared along with it. The large silver spider moved its 8 giant legs, and its figure rapidly shrank, turning into a streak of light. With a xiao, it leaped into the mine, and was no longer seen. This ancient mine, what exactly was going on? Ling Han frowned deeply. In the beginning, he only thought that there was a cursed tool buried underneath, or a great elite that affected this land. However, he had obtained a cursed tool, yet 12 incomparably powerful corpses from when they were alive had appeared, and there was even a large silver spider that he suspected was still alive. He couldn't even be sure that it was only a phantom image from millions and millions of years ago, or if it really existed. It was so strong that it couldn't be approached at all, so it was naturally impossible to fathom. Chapter 535. Everyone joined forces to battle the tentacle monster. Ling Han was obviously the main force. Aside from him, no one else could withstand this beast's whip. After he blocked the tentacle monster's attack, Hun Yo and the others took the opportunity to show their might, slashing at this beast to collect its flesh and blood. However, this monster's defense was astonishing, and sabers and swords were completely useless against it. It was extremely slippery, as if it was covered in a layer of oil. Moreover, it was extremely elastic, and similarly had the effect of neutralizing power. There were only 2 people that could pose a threat to it, Ling Han and Hun Yo. Ling Han had the demon birth sword, which was extremely sharp, while Hun Yo had sharp claws that could forcibly tear open the tentacle monster's skin, tearing off a large chunk of flesh with one move. Her violence level was terrifying. The gold-seeking rat shrunk into Zhu Xian Er's embrace and covered its eyes with its 2 little claws, no longer daring to. This little girl was too savage, and kept on thinking about its flesh, scaring it to death just thinking about it. The tentacle monster was furious, and waved more tentacles, launching an attack at Ling Han and Zhu Xian Er. However, there were only 8 tentacles in total, and as they waved, they stirred up the sea, rolling up a tsunami that was several dozen meters tall. This beast was truly enormous. Just the tentacles that were exposed above the sea were over 300 meters long, and the part in the water was definitely even larger, easily stirring up a furious tide. Ling Han originally wanted to charge into the sea and behead this tentacle monster's main body, but once he entered the sea, he discovered something was off. The pressure in the water was astonishingly great, squeezing his bones to the point of clanking. If he went deep into the sea, his entire body would be squeezed to pieces. After fighting for half a day, the tentacle monster still retreated in defeat, leaving behind a long tentacle. This was severed by Ling Han and Hun Yo's combined attack. One slashed with a sword, and one tore with a claw, forcibly leaving behind the opponent's enormous tentacle. If it weren't for that, that big monster might not have retreated. Ling Han stored this tentacle into the Black Tower, causing Wenren Qian, Li Fengyu, and Yuan Qinghe to be speechless. How big was this guy's spatial spirit tool, to be able to store such a large tentacle inside? There's grilled fish to eat. Hun Yo smiled happily. They advanced. This place obviously wasn't suitable for grilling fish, so they'd have to wait until they reached dry land before fixing it up. However, on the 2nd day, they immediately encountered the tentacle monster's attack again, and it actually grew back the tentacle that was severed yesterday. It was obvious that the tentacle was a bit shorter, and the color was more tender. If it weren't so, Ling Han and the others would definitely think that it was another tentacle monster. The result of the battle was that the tentacle monster once again contributed a tentacle, which Ling Han stored into his bag. However, on the 3rd day, it came again, and then left behind another tentacle. Everyone was speechless. Did you come to hunt, or to deliver gifts? On the 4th day, this tentacle monster came as promised. This time, Ling Han and the others had already formulated a battle strategy in advance. After Ling Han heavily wounded the tentacle monster with the annihilating dragon star arrow, the rock spirit and Hun Yo would work together to grab a tentacle and forcibly pull it up from the bottom of the sea. It was definitely a colossal creature, with a tentacle that was over 500 meters long, and then its body. To everyone's surprise, they originally thought that this was a super large octopus, but who would have thought that this big guy's body actually shrunk into a clamshell? This clamshell was naturally astonishingly large, and its 300-meter-long body was like a palace at the bottom of the sea. The battlefield moved into the air, and this tentacle monster's battle prowess was greatly reduced. It was ganged up on by everyone, and in the end, all 8 tentacles were chopped off, with no time to grow back. Then, the clamshell was also broken, and it was blasted into pieces. Huh! Everyone cried out in surprise, seeing that there was actually a gigantic pearl inside the clamshell. Even if they were very far away, they could still feel the spiritual chi emitted from the pearl, making people feel at ease as if they could comprehend the truth of martial arts. Such a large pearl needs at least 1,000 years to nurture, right? Li Fengyu guessed. Wenren Qian shook her head, and said, definitely more than that. I've seen 1,000-year-old pearls, and they were only fist-sized. This one is about the size of a millstone. Ling Han also nodded. He'd once obtained some 1,000-year-old pearls in his last life. Grinding them into powder and adding them into ingredients could greatly increase the effects of forming a pill. They were about the size of a fist, far from this one. The longer a creature lives, the rarer it is. This giant clam has lived for who knows how many years, possibly several thousand or 10,000 years. He said. According to my conjecture, this giant clam was captured by this tentacle monster, and even its shell was occupied by it, slowly digesting the pearl's power. The reason why it could grow new limbs so quickly is firstly because of its own characteristics, and secondly because of the benefits provided by this pearl. Zhu Xian'er was astonished, and said, in other words, this pearl is originally even larger. It should be so. Ling Han nodded. Rich, such a large pearl, how many origin crystals can it sell for? Li Fengyu's eyes were full of stars. Such a treasure, you actually want to use it to exchange for origin crystals. Yuan Cheng, he sneered. Short-sighted. The gold-seeking rat was instantly displeased. How did baby offend you? It stared at Yuan Cheng and ground its teeth, really wanting to bite someone. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, we should still thank this beast. Not only did it give us a large amount of beast meat, it also has a 10,000-year-old treasured pearl. I think, in the entire vast lands, this is unique. Clams that could live for 10,000 years were few in the first place, and normally, they only had a lifespan of a few hundred years. To raise a 10,000-year-old treasured pearl, not only did it have to live long, it also had to have good luck and not be injured by any living creature in between. In the end, this old clam also didn't escape its fate of being eaten. The tentacle monster's tentacles were all-pervasive and could bore into the old clam's closed shell, sucking the old clam's flesh and blood clean. It definitely met its nemesis. Ling Han put away the pearl. This pearl was too precious, and if it was broken and divided, then at least half of the essence within would be lost. That was something only an idiot would do. He put away the pearl and gave Li Fengyu, his sister, and Wenren Qian some spiritual liquid as compensation. Everyone was happy. After all, killing the tentacle monster was mainly Ling Han and Hunyou's credit. Yuan Cheng, he also didn't get anything, but he wasn't dissatisfied. This was because Ling Han treated him as one of his own, and giving him something would be treating him as an outsider. His mentality also changed, from being unconvinced and resisting at the beginning to being sincerely convinced now, mainly because he realized the gap between him and Ling Han. However, at this moment, 3 people were seen flying over from afar, their target clear. 2 old men and 1 young man. The 2 old men were in the deity transformation tier, while the young man was in the flower blossom tier, impressively walking in front, appearing somewhat unusual. Martial arts was the place that paid the most attention to seniority. Hand over that precious pearl, and you guys can get lost, the young man ordered. When his gaze swept over Zhu Xian'er, his eyes involuntarily shone, and he pointed over, saying, she stays. All right, I'll sell it to you." Hunyo immediately clapped her hands in agreement. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 536. You want to refuse? Ling Han asked with a smile. Without waiting for the other party to reply, he directly plucked out a handful of the other party's hair, then picked up a strand and threw it into a jade bottle. "I'll just call it the bottle of curses," he thought to himself. Then, he said, "Think carefully. You shouldn't be so threatening." Na Zhiyan wanted to cry, but had no tears. The previous 2 times he had been cursed had left him with lingering fear, especially the second time. He had directly lost his will to live, and now that he thought about it, it was really too terrifying. Obviously, Ling Han only needed to obtain one thing from him to be able to cast the curse. Now that he had a large amount of hair that Ling Han had taken, who knew how many times he would die? Moreover, who said that there were only 2 kinds of curses, abdominal pain and the desire to die? "It is my honor not to work for young Master Han," Na Zhiyan immediately said, his expression full of righteousness. Ling Han patted his shoulder, and said, "Not bad, this is what I wanted to hear. One should be more open and loyal." "Yes, young Master Han is right," Na Zhiyan said seriously. Ling Han knocked him out with a single slap, then brought him out of the Black Tower. Though he had the control of the cursed tool, Ling Han still decided to keep the secret of the Black Tower as much as possible so that others would not know about it. After bringing Na Zhiyan back to the imperial city, Ling Han finally woke him up with a slap, and said, "Go." "Oh, right, don't think that you won't be affected just because you've run far away. 3 days later, I'll let you have another good time. Young Master Han, I believe you. There's no need to try." Na Zhiyan hurriedly waved his hands. "How can I do that? If I don't try, how can I prove my sincerity?" Ling Han said unhappily. "Fine, was there a difference in sincerity and threats?" Na Zhiyan could only leave obediently. He had to complete this task. Only then would he have a chance of survival. As long as Xian Kongming died, then naturally no one would know what he had done. Cursing someone to death, who would believe that there was such a thing? Just like how he had wanted to commit suicide before. Even if he really died, who would believe that he had actually been murdered? However, he was still slightly doubtful. Would that thing really be able to curse him after being separated by a great distance? This was something he had to confirm. Otherwise, even if he managed to deceive Xian Kongming and failed to curse him to death, he would still be dead. In the next 3 days, he traveled with all his might, wanting to get as far away from Ling Han as possible. He wanted to test if that treasure could really kill someone from thousands of miles away. He quickly entered the sea instead of flying in the sky. As soon as he entered the sea, his legs miraculously disappeared and turned into a long fishtail. With a flick of his tail, his speed instantly soared as he swam towards the depths of the sea. He was much faster than when he was flying on land. The sea race was indeed suited to living in the sea. Only in the sea could they maximize their combat strength. The bottom of the sea was very dark, but for flower blossom tier cultivators, it was nothing. Along the way, he saw familiar sights. Various sea races appeared one after another. Though flower blossom tier cultivators could not be considered ultimate elites of the sea race, they could still be considered as elites. Thus, as he traveled, a considerable number of sea races paid their respects to him. Some young girls of the sea race even threw flirtatious glances at him. This sea monster was famous for his beauty and charm, so he naturally attracted the attention of countless young girls. However, just as that lord was feeling very pleased with himself, an incredibly strange scene appeared. That lord actually fell to the bottom of the sea, and with his head touching the bottom, he spat out bubbles as he said, "I am a stinky bug, just let me die." It really made people's eyeballs drop to the ground. It worked. All of a sudden, Na Zhiyan did not know what he was feeling. However, there was only one thought in his mind, and that was that he had to complete the task that Ling Han had given him. Otherwise, he would definitely die. Ling Han temporarily did not think about the matter between Na Zhiyan and Xian Kongming. In any case, if Na Zhiyan could bring back something that belonged to Xian Kongming, then he would curse him to death. If that did not work, then he would immediately go to the middle state and let this guy chase after him. He returned home and went out for a few days, so he naturally had to have a good reunion with his family. If he could successfully resolve the matter with the sea race, then there would be no need for the Ling family to move. Otherwise, it would be better for them to move. Lu Yutong and the other two girls were all very affectionate, but Zhu Xian'er's injuries had already healed for a few days, so there was no reason to delay any longer. Thus, she took her leave first and sent the medicine to the Half-Moon sect. Then, she directly went to the extreme Yang city to wait for Ling Han. After staying for a few days, he went to the imperial city again, because he had an appointment with Na Zhiyan for 10 days. However, after staying in the imperial city for a day, Na Zhiyan returned. He handed over a bag and said, "Young Master Han, I only obtained 3 broken scales from Lord Kongming." He was afraid that Ling Han would not be satisfied, so he hurriedly added, "Lord Kongming is an ancient water-splitting beast, and the scales he sheds are treasured tools used to make armor. It is very difficult to obtain." Ling Han smiled, and said, "It's fine. As long as it's the scales shed from his body, it's fine." He knocked Na Zhiyan unconscious and stored him in the Black Tower. Then, he took out the vial of curses, crushed some of the broken scales, and stuffed them into the vial, directly activating the curse of death. Immediately, a flower bloomed. This meant that the curse had been successfully cast. Otherwise, if the opponent's level was too high and his fate was too strong, resulting in the curse not taking effect, then this flower would not have bloomed. A mighty elite of the deity transformation tier was cursed to death from 10,000 miles away just like that. Ling Han's heart trembled. There were all sorts of strange and bizarre techniques in this world. Perhaps there were other powers in this world that could similarly kill someone from 10,000 miles away. However, this kind of technique would definitely have its limits. Actually, as long as one was careful, it could be avoided. Since the curse had been successfully cast, Ling Han returned home, planning to stay for another 2 months before leaving for the extreme Yang city to meet up with Ing Hong and Zhu Xian'er and head to the middle state together. However, the peaceful days only lasted for half a month. On this day, a tide suddenly rose on the sea, and then there was great chaos. Although the Ling family lived in seclusion, there were always people going out. Soon, they found that there were more and more refugees in the town in recent days. After asking about the situation, he learned that an army had suddenly appeared on the sea, sweeping through everything in its path and advancing toward the royal capital. Marine Corps Ling Han was astonished. Could it be that Xian Kongming hadn't died? However, wasn't this guy usually very low-key? Why had he suddenly come with such great fanfare? He brought Hu Niu with him, and hurried towards the imperial city. When he arrived, the army had yet to arrive, so he headed towards the ocean. After traveling for another day, the army on the ocean finally came into view. They didn't look too different from the human army, but they were all infantrymen. There were only about 1,000 of them. The soldiers in the front carried flags and wore scale armors. Their weapons were mainly spears and axes. In addition, many of them had webbing between their fingers. It was the same for their feet. They didn't wear shoes, so it could be clearly seen. Merfolk. The 7th princess is the most outstanding genius of the Hellion royal clan, but has yet to advance into the Shattering Void tier. Ling Han had heard him say that there were 3 great royal clans in the North Sea, Hellion, Xianyu, and Wenren. They all had ultimate elites of the Shattering Void tier overseeing them, and were equivalent to a great sect in the middle state. Whether Hellion Sun Shui was in the Shattering Void tier or not, even if she was only in the Heaven tier, she would still be able to sweep through the North region. Moreover, Ling Han felt that she was far stronger than he had been in his last life. As for whether she could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Sword Emperor and the others, that was hard to judge, because he had not even seen her once. Thinking about it, she should have gone for the Vial of Curses. Otherwise, the timing would not be so coincidental. But since Na Zhiyan had not leaked the secret, how did she know about this? Could it be that Xian Kongming had leaked the secret before his death? Ling Han thought for a moment, then once again knocked Na Zhiyan unconscious and threw him into the Black Tower. Then, he, too, headed towards the Imperial City. He took a detour and overtook the army of the Sea Race, arriving at the Imperial City ahead of time. To be honest, the advance of this army was really not very fast. But no matter how slow it was, after another 2 days, the Sea Race still arrived outside the Imperial City. Everyone in Fire Country acted as if they were facing a great enemy. On the city walls, everyone drew their swords and nocked their arrows. A great battle was about to break out at any moment. However, in front of an army where even the weakest was in the spiritual pedestal tier, they really could not withstand a single blow. This could not be considered an army, and could only be considered Hellion Sun Shui's guards. After all, there were too few of them. I don't care who obtained that thing, immediately hand it over. Otherwise, 3 days later, I will cause a furious wave that will drown the whole desolate north. Hellion Sun Shui's pleasant yet cold voice was heard from within the carriage. She released a sliver of her aura, and instantly, the world seemed to lose its color. Pa, 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 the weapons in everyone's hands fell to the ground. Aside from those who had the aptitude of a king among martial artists, everyone else knelt on the ground. Everyone was shocked. They had not even fought, and it was already like this. The opponent's strength was practically hair-raising. What to do? They had absolutely no idea what that thing the opponents spoke of was, so how could they hand it over? Speaking of which, they were really unlucky. A few days ago, someone charged into the Imperial Palace and was forced to sign a treaty, which was extremely humiliating. Now, someone charged into the Imperial City and threatened them. Yet, they did not have the slightest bit of temper. Although the woman in the carriage did not show her face, no one dared to doubt her words. She only let out a little bit of her aura, and everyone knew that this was definitely not a joke. She had this kind of strength, and at the same time, would do so. Ling Han frowned. Now, he was completely sure that what she wanted was the Vial of Curses. After a slight hesitation, he let Hunyo enter the Black Tower first, and then ascended the city walls. Milord! 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 When it was Ling Han's turn, everyone knelt down one after another as if they had met their savior. Ling Han laughed, and said, "Don't count on me. Now, even 10,000 of me added together would not be a match for a single finger of hers." Hearing Ling Han say so, everyone looked disappointed. Even Ling Han was not a match for her, so what could they do? Ling Han looked into the distance, and said loudly, "We can talk, but if you make a move against me again, I will immediately leave, and I guarantee that you will never find me again." Impudence! How dare you speak to my master like this? The warriors of the Sea Race all shouted. In their hearts, Hellion Sun Shui was a godlike existence, and could not tolerate the slightest bit of blasphemy. A mere human actually wanted to have a talk with their master. Wishful thinking. Yet a voice was heard from within the carriage, and said, "Then let's talk." Obviously, after having Ling Han slip away once, Hellion Sun Shui at least acknowledged Ling Han's ability to escape. Otherwise, she would have directly captured him for interrogation, and he would not even have the right to talk. Chapter 538. Ling Han smiled slightly. He knew that the other party would definitely be willing to talk. I have a few questions to consult your highness, he said loudly. Oh, then answer one of my questions first. Otherwise, there's no need to talk, Helian Xuanxue said indifferently. Is that bottle in your hands? As expected. Ling Han did not deny it and said, yes, it's indeed in my hands. There was a moment of silence in the carriage. He did not know if Helian Xuanxue was too excited and was trying to control her emotions. After a while, he heard her say, all right, what do you want to know? How does your highness know about this bottle? Ling Han asked. Some things should not be known by too many people. Let's talk somewhere else, Helian Xuanxue said. Ling Han nodded, and said, all right, follow me. Don't get too close. Otherwise, if I'm frightened, I might never appear again. Helian Xuanxue snorted coldly, appearing very displeased. Ling Han walked in front, while the sea race followed behind, and the direction that Ling Han took was naturally towards that mine. If impressively Sun Shui really wanted to make a move, he would bring the sea race into the mine and kill them with a trap. The speed of the sea race on land was not fast. Fortunately, the mine was not far from the imperial city. Thus, in less than half an hour, they also arrived at the place. Stop! Helian Xuanxue stopped the carriage from afar, and said loudly, human, this is the ancient mine. He could not hide it from her. Ling Han stopped and turned around, and said, that's right. A figure walked out of the carriage, but her entire body was wrapped in rays of purple divine light, and her appearance could not be seen at all. Even height, male or female, could not be distinguished. One could only vaguely see that she wore emerald green clothes, and her hair was extremely long. All of you wait here, she ordered. Yes, your highness. Everyone obeyed. Helian Xuanxue took a step and approached Ling Han. She had enough confidence that as long as the distance was close enough, she could directly take down Ling Han. She would not give him any chance to use the teleportation talisman to escape. Close enough. Ling Han said with a smile. In fact, with his divine sense, he could let the other party come a little closer, but there was no need to let the other party know his limits and trump cards. Helian Xuanxue couldn't help but sigh in her heart. If she attacked from this distance, she only had a 30% chance of success. Your Highness, you can speak now, Ling Han said. Helian Sun Shui snorted lightly. A mere flower blossom tear cultivator acted as if he was on equal footing with her, making her feel really displeased. But for the sake of that bottle, she still endured her rage and said, actually, it was I who intentionally leaked this information to Xian Kongming. Ling Han was astonished. Xian Kongming was just a chess piece. Using a cursed weapon to kill someone, there were no traces to follow. No matter how bizarre the death was, it was still a normal death. This was because the murderer did not need to do it himself, so how could he give himself away? But using a cursed weapon proved one thing. Either the opponent's strength was too strong, and they couldn't take it head-on. Secondly, perhaps the other party's status was too special, so he couldn't make a move on them openly. What kind of situation did Helian Sun Shui belong to? So, after Xian Kongming died mysteriously, you immediately guessed that he was killed by a cursed weapon, so you brought people to attack, Ling Han guessed. That's right. After a long time, you obviously ran, and how could I still find you? Helian Sun Shui said. Ling Han was curious, and said, you're at least a high-level heaven-tier being. You want a cursed weapon. Could it be that you want to kill a shattering void tier cultivator? If it could really curse a shattering void tier cultivator to death, then what level would the jade bottle be? Divine tool. You don't need to worry about that. Helian Sun Shui snorted, and said, this kind of treasured tool is not something you can possess. Give it to me, and I can guarantee your safety, and I can compensate you with a spirit tool. Oh, what spirit tool, is it that precious? Ling Han unleashed the demon birth sword. Very obviously, Helian Sun Shue's figure stiffened slightly. She definitely saw the grade of the demon birth sword. A 10th tier spirit tool, what could she take out to move Ling Han? She really underestimated this human, his wealth was a bit shocking. She paused, and then said, I am determined to get that bottle, so I advise you to hand it over. Otherwise, even if you flee to the ends of the world, I will find you. Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, Really? Are you sure that wherever I go, you will also go? Helian Sun Shui snorted coldly, and was about to boast, but immediately reacted, and said towards the front, Is this what you're relying on to hide in the ancient mine? Naive, she said coldly. Since the cursed weapon has been taken out, the cursed chi here will begin to drop, and who is this North Sea's royal family? My fate is determined by the heavens, so how could I be harmed by these cursed chi? Quite at Sundara, but unfortunately, she had no idea what changes had occurred here, and the cursed chi was nothing at all. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, Then come and chase me. Maybe if you catch up to me, I'll let you, he. He broke into a run and entered the ancient mine. Helian Sun Shui didn't know what he meant, but thinking that it couldn't be anything good, she immediately snorted coldly and chased after him. Ling Han didn't care, and attacked wildly. He wanted to lure out the 12 ancient corpses below, or the blood lake would do, and the silver divine spider was even more ideal. In short, as long as he could suppress Helian Sun Shui, it would be fine. And after this battle, would there still be sea race that dared to come? Refusing a toast, only to drink a forfeit. Helian Sun Shui snorted coldly, and struck out with her palm. Origin power turned into a beautiful large hand, pressing down towards Ling Han. Before the palm force arrived, the terrifying pressure had already cracked the skin all over Ling Han's body, and blood sprayed wildly. One had to know that he had the body of iron sheet, and his body was as hard as rare metals of the same level, but his skin was cracked by the pressure. If he really took a palm, would he still be alive? What a strong bitch! Ling Han exclaimed, and threw out the 2 god corpses with both hands. He didn't intend to take them back, this place should be good for burying the 2 god corpses. The 12 ancient corpses definitely had great origins, and wouldn't be weaker than these 2 god corpses. Huh? Helian Sun Shui stopped. She arrived in front of the 2 god corpses, and a look of surprise appeared on her beautiful face that outsiders couldn't see. These are god corpses. She murmured softly, and the look of disbelief became even more intense. Ling Han actually had 2 god corpses on him, this human was truly strange. However, the divinity essence of the 2 god corpses had already been completely lost, and this was the mortal realm, with its own rules. God-level elites weren't stronger than shattering void-tier elites, and he wanted to scare her with 2 god corpses. Naive. With a casual wave, she separated the 2 god corpses. Since the divinity essence had already been completely lost, it had lost any value, and she didn't bother to put it away. You can't run, Helian Sun Shui said coldly. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, Who said I ran? He already arrived at the place where the vial of curses was placed, and shot out a punch. The terrifying origin power, added with his body's brute force, formed an extremely terrifying destructive power. Pang! A pillar of blood soared into the sky. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 539. The test was very simple. One didn't have to fight this puppet. One only had to place one's palm on a stone tablet. If a light flashed, one would be qualified to enter the artifact pavilion. It sounded so simple, but there were pitifully few people who could make the stone tablet light up. Other than the powerful figures of the older generation, there were only Yao Huiyu, Su Xiu Ran, Dong Ling, and a few others in the younger generation. Just put your hand on the stone tablet. There was a newcomer who asked curiously. Of course not. You have to meditate on all of your martial skills and cultivation techniques in your sea of consciousness. The stone tablet will magnify the power of these secret techniques to the limit and evaluate your ultimate battle prowess. An old antique said. This is the martial Tao stone, a legendary treasure. Even if you're only in the flower blossom tier, it's possible to surpass the shattering void tier, because this evaluates the battle prowess of the pinnacle tier, or in other words, puts everyone's tier on the same level, and then compares their battle prowess. Such a ranking should be said to be a ranking of potential. It's possible that you'll be far from reaching such a level in the future, or it's also possible that you'll have a fortuitous encounter and might surpass in the future. That old antique said, not really. There are 100 names on the stone tablet, and if your pinnacle tier battle prowess can surpass any one of them, you can be ranked among them. The stronger your battle prowess is in the future, the higher your ranking will be. However, although this mystery realm has opened for the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, this martial Tao stone is very likely to record all the geniuses of the past million years, or even millions of years. To be able to leave one's name on it, even if it's only the last place, is a super genius that's hard to come by in tens of thousands of years. Hearing that old antique's words, everyone was a bit excited. If they could leave their name on the stone tablet, wouldn't that shock the ancients and surpass the contemporaries? However, the difficulty was too high. A few people had already entered the Tool Pavilion, but none of them left their name on the stone tablet. Ling Han walked over. The person who ranked first on the stone tablet was actually called First, who knew where he got his courage from. Did he think no one had ever done it before, and no one would be able to do it in the future? The second place was much more modest, and his name was Origin. The third place was called For Directions, the fourth was Shadow, the fifth was Moon, the sixth was Gu, the seventh was Bai, the eighth was Ming Dao, the ninth was Donkey Riding Old Man, and the 10th was 9 Paths. Ling Han went down, and every name was extremely unfamiliar, but when he came to the 99th place, a familiar name finally jumped into his eyes, Lunar King. His heart trembled. Had this just been left behind by the Lunar King, or had it been several 100,000 years ago? If it was the latter, could the Purple Moon Empire and this ancient dynasty be related? For a moment, Ling Han was lost in thought, and only came back to his senses after Zhu Xian called him a few times. Let's go and give it a try. They pushed through the crowd, wanting to push forward. Some people were easy to talk to, and they themselves had already tried and failed, so what if they gave it to others? However, some people had bad tempers and were even more jealous. They couldn't enter themselves, so they didn't want others to enter. Towards such people, there was naturally no need to be polite. Ling Han directly attacked. Xiao, 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 the dog blocking the way was swung out like a scarecrow. Wang, the stone tablet ahead glowed, which meant that someone had passed the test and could enter the Tool Pavilion. That's Wenren Qian. As expected of a daughter blessed by the heavens. They all say that her strength is second only to Dong Ling, and it's indeed true. Che, do you know what light appeared when Dong Ling, passed? I don't know. Let me tell you, the martial arts stone can only emit light of 3 colors. One is red, one is green, and one is purple. Among them, purple light represents the weakest battle prowess, and red light is the strongest. Just now, Wenren Qian triggered purple light. But Dong Ling, triggered red light. With that said, everyone nodded. They were both daughters blessed by the heavens, but Wenren Qian was still a long distance away from Dong Ling, Brother Ling. When it came to Ling Han, Wenren Qian couldn't help but pause. She didn't immediately enter the Tool Pavilion. Anyway, it wouldn't matter if she waited a little longer. She wanted to see Ling Han's extreme battle prowess with her own eyes. Although this didn't mean that Ling Han could really reach such heights in the future, it could still be used as a reference. Ling Han nodded, which was considered a greeting. Jia Ming is here. Everyone dispersed. This was a fiend who killed without any scruples, but he was the most valued disciple of the Earth Dragon sect's next generation. Who would dare to harm him? Jia Ming strode over, a terrifying aura rising all over his body as he turned into multiple large snakes. Ling Han couldn't help but frown. Jia Ming's cultivation showed a shocking leap, and he actually reached the deity transformation tier. He once said that there was a fateful encounter for him in the ocean, and it was indeed true. In a short few days, he broke through to the deity transformation tier. In the younger generation, only Su Xiu-ran managed to do so. However, wasn't the Earth Dragon an earthworm? Why did the majority of the people of the Earth Dragon sect manifest the shadow of large snakes? Although they were all long and wriggling things, there was still a huge difference between snakes and earthworms, right? Jia Ming walked like a dragon or a tiger, and it was as if there was an ancient savage beast hidden within his body, extremely terrifying. As the earth rumbled, he walked in front of the martial arts stone, and first gave Ling Han a murderous look, then reached out and pressed towards the martial arts stone. When, the martial arts stone immediately shone purple light. However, Jia Ming didn't let go of his hand, and continued to press. The light emitted by the martial arts stone changed color, becoming green. This meant that Jia Ming's extreme battle prowess had increased, which was very normal. Pressing one's hand on it required one to develop one's own secret technique in the sea of consciousness. After the martial arts stone accepted it, it would continue to deduce, judge the extreme battle prowess, and then display it. Thus, the highest battle prowess couldn't be surpassed, but one could conceal one's strength. Hee, my battle prowess will break through the ages. Jia Ming shouted loudly, and his whole body surged with blood qi, forming a terrifying pressure. Hung, the people nearby all fell to the ground, actually unable to withstand his impact. Ling Han's expression was solemn. His strength and Jia Ming's were originally about the same, and now that the latter impressively stepped into the deity transformation tier, Ling Han was definitely inferior in terms of physical arts alone. If the latter's battle prowess soared straight to the heaven tier, then Ling Han would really be in trouble. It turned red. Heavens! Everyone hugged their heads and exclaimed. As expected, he was a heaven-bestowed genius, making the martial arts stone show red, sharing the limelight with Dong Ling and Su Xiu-ran. Ah! Jia Ming roared again, blue veins throbbing on his forehead, and the shadow of a large snake appeared behind him, hissing. When, the martial arts stone showed black light. The 100 names from before all disappeared, and 2 words appeared on the stone tablet, leave name. Jia Ming's strength had reached the level of being on par with ancient geniuses, and could at least be ranked in the top 100. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.